good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
Greetings, constant listeners, and welcome yet again to the Losers Club, a Stephen King podcast. My name is Rockin' Randall Colburn, and if you're feeling low, well then hop in your magic Ford Thunderbird and hightail it back to Thunderclap. We don't want you. I'm just kidding. It's Low Men and Yellow Coats Day. This week, we're discussing one of King's most beloved quote-unquote novellas, the likes of which is the first of 5 stories to fill the pages of Hearts in Atlantis, his 1999 collection. Yes, we're doing it a bit lopsided. This week, it's all low men all the time. Next week, we'll be discussing the 4 other stories, including the title story, which I'd say are more or less of a piece thematically, so stay tuned for that. A few things before we get started. 1. Did you know that we have a Patreon? We do. We post lots of episodes there that are just as good as the ones we post here. You can find it at patreon.com/thebarons. It makes for a great Christmas gift. 2, did you know we have a merch store? We do. You can find it at losersclubstore.com. Shirts, mugs, hoodies, a new special collaboration with Loudmouth Threads. We just launched for Black Friday. It's all there, and it's all good. Losersclubstore.com. 3, have you left us a good review on iTunes or wherever you consume podcasts? Do it, please. Lots of people gave us 1-star reviews because we said Trump was stinky in like 2017, so go give us some love. Okay, Low Men time. Mac, introduce yourself and tell me, 1, what's your Hearts in Atlantis experience? And 2, is Low Men in Yellow Coats a novella?
This is Wolfman Mac Gerber, baby. Can't believe it. I have officially become Room 237 with Hearts in Atlantis.
That's right.
The Gerber family runs strong. But yeah, my Hearts in Atlantis connection. I just read the book over the last few months. The movie was my first introduction to it in general, which I really loved it when I saw it as a kid. Obviously there's no D-Tower stuff in the movie, rightly so. I don't know if it would make any sense because they have never covered any of that, but you guys are going to go into that in another episode. But that was my first introduction. I always wanted to read the book, and then Justin, I remember telling me that it was broken out and kind of like a smattering of stories, and then that intrigued me even more. So when I started reading it, I was excited, to finally cover the Low Men in Yellow Coats, but I was more excited to get to the stories that I hadn't read and see how those were connected. But I am excited to talk about the Low Men in Yellow Coats today.
So wait, did you say you had read Low Men before?
I hadn't.
But you hadn't.
But reading it, it's so faithful. The movie's so faithful to the book for the most part. I was able to just like fly through that because I just love those characters, and it was easy to revisit that in my head. But I was more excited to get to the stories I hadn't read before, but this was cool. I love this story for different reasons. So it's going to be exciting to get into those.
Is it a novella?
Is it a novella? Yeah, I think so.
Why?
Because I don't think it merits like, well, I mean, what's the classic definition of a novella then? I don't think it. I mean, honestly, are you saying that you think it's more of a book because it's so long?
I'm just being a bit of a brat. That's all. I just think it's
certainly
funny.
Not a short story.
I know. Well, I think the reason we can call it a novella, even though it's over 300 pages, is because I think relative to most King works that it's short. So,
but also, I mean, it isn't the whole story, like if the other stories in this collection had nothing to do with this story, I'd be like, okay, this is a book, what I mean? But like, there's more entwined things and kind of wrap up stuff later. So it doesn't feel like, it merits being a book.
Okay. Good answer. Dan, say hello and tell us your experience with Hearts in Atlantis.
This is Dan, Guys Like Us Flieger. I read this novel, I think, the first time in 2005. And I did say novel because I think it's a novel. It's just a novel that's contained within a greater work. I'm a big Kurt Vonnegut fan, and most of his novels are under 200 pages. So I don't think length really has anything to do with it. It's just relative to Stephen King, who usually puts out like 800-page bangers. But I think it's the cool concept too, and it's just the idea of like having the 2 shorter stories and then the 3 really short stories. But I have the 99 paperback, but I also did the audiobook, and it was read by William Hurt.
Nice. And
I wasn't sure at first how he would do, but he actually did an awesome job. And when the low men scenes were on, he really got into the voice work. He made them, sound like snakes. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. But I just watched Body Heat for the first time, and he was in that. So that's all I kept playing in my head as I was hearing him read it, was just him having sex.
Oh, I just watched Altered States for the first time. All the way through. So there's a lot of sex in that too.
Regular Bill Hurt fan club over here. Anna, say hello and tell us your experience with Low Men in Yellow Coats and Hearts in Atlantis.
Hi, this is Anna Marie Hotsy Totsy Cox. I'm thinking that might be my permanent intro. I also really like the
Hotsy Coxy.
Hotsy Totsy. Hotsy Coxy. All right, that's it. Anna Marie Hotsy Coxy. That's it forever for now.
I love it.
So I have this weird, like, aversion to short stories. Like, I don't know why, but I feel like I want to, if I'm going to read, I want to like read.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like the difference between sprinting and a marathon, maybe. So I did not get to this during my, intro to Stephen King years. The first time I read everything, which would be probably, high school, college. I have read it before, but I can't say exackly when. Again, I'll just claim during my drinking years, that must be it.
Sure.
And so like I had some ideas about where I knew the story basically, but it was really great to read it basically fresh, in terms of like the language and whatnot. I guess for me, it's the distinction between a novella and a book is just that if he had put it out as a book, I probably would have read it sooner. So, and also he would have made more money, although I guess at this point, like he does not need to make more money.
Right.
Buy another radio station, I guess. I don't know.
I imagine that there's like editions that are just Low Men. I feel like there has to be, because he does that with like the Bachman books and stuff. So.
Right. Interestingly, so I usually buy the used version just to my reduce, reuse, recycle personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought this used, and it's actually, I started reading it, and the quotes were all at a single quote mark, and I was like, and it is a British edition. So there's nothing different besides that. I assume like they're not. I
feel like that would drive me crazy. The single quotes.
Yeah. They don't spell, things with OU that should be spelled with, O. They're just, it's just the single quotes. And I haven't seen the movie, in part because this was my other, like, I hate the title Hearts in Atlantis.
You're not alone in that.
It's so funny because
it's weird. And Atlantis makes me cringe. It makes me think of like the inclusive resort. In
the Bahamas.
Yeah. and it just like, what does that mean? Hearts. I mean, a lot of his novels, I guess. No, actually, most of his novels are very fucking straightforward, right?
Well, have you read the title story yet?
I haven't, but we are talking about Low Men in Yellow Coats, right? If that had been the title of this, I probably would have read it sooner. Also, I mean, Hearts in Atlantis is a good name for that story, right? Yeah. It's not I don't know who the fuck decided it's a good name for the collection.
For the collection, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it kind of needed to be something else because it really, first of all, doesn't, and for that second story, I mean, we'll get into that later, but I don't think it's a good name for that story. and I don't, I haven't read it yet, so I can't even
speak on it.
Yeah, but that is funny because the Low Men in Yellow Coats, the movie should not have been titled that. It should have called something else. It didn't make any sense.
Oh, I know. That's the funny thing about the movie. Yeah, like there's one line I think that they added that sort of tries to justify the title, which is very funny to me.
What's this? Oh, it's I don't know, Hearts in Atlantis. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
even, like it's
Son,
a
you're-
saying
What does
or
that-
something.
What
It's
does
like your
that
head's in the
sign
clouds
say?
and your
Yeah,
heart's in
exactly.
Atlantis.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I guess I was Hearts in Atlantis.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about, as we ease into this, let's talk a little bit about the history of the book in a section we call the Dairy Public Library.
Mike Hanlon, if you see...
Excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Tell Mike Hanlon that I had to go, that I had to get cleaned up. Tell him. Tell him. Tell him I'll see him tonight.
Get out! Last chance, don't you? Get out! Get out! Excuse me, man.
Here in the library, we talk about the history of a book, and it's interesting because I think sort of what's notable in terms of the release of this book specifically was that it came out just 3 months after King was struck by a car and almost died. I think we're gonna, I was bandying this idea around, but I think we're probably gonna do a whole episode about the car accident, because I feel like it had such an impact on his work, and he's spoken about it so much, and there was some odd stuff that kind of went down with it that at least with the guy that hit him, that I think it could warrant its own episode, but we'll probably get to that next year. But yeah, in this accident he suffered a collapsed right lung, multiple fractures of his right leg, a scalp laceration, and a broken hip. And yeah, he was just out walking on the side of the road, and a van just plowed him down. And so he didn't really do any press for this book. And so it was kind of frustrating because I felt like I didn't really get any insight from King on like what prompted him to write this and what made him want to tackle these themes and various other things. So it's interesting to consider from that perspective. But yeah, it was released on September 14th, 1999. And he sort of did a follow-up release called Hearts in Suspension some years later, which is essentially, it includes Hearts in Atlantis, the story, but then also folds in some of his old campus newspaper writings, which I'm going to be discussing next week and on our archives episode this month. And because I think it all kind of contributes to it, and some essays from other writers that he went to school with at the University of Maine. And he spoke a little bit more about the story then, but that was like in 2016, I believe, or somewhere around there. But yeah, he said very little though about Low Men in Yellow Coats specifically. The book though was nominated for the Bram Stoker Award, the British Fantasy Award, and the World Fantasy Award in 2000. It was a runner-up for the Locust Award for Best Collection. It didn't win any of the other awards though. But yeah, I think it's also worth it to note because Low Men in Yellow Coats specifically is kind of a I wouldn't call it pivotal, but I think an important Dark Tower text, which I think a lot of people, if they are Tower heads but aren't really exploring the grander King universe, they might surprise them to hear that, and we're going to talk about that specifically. But I think it's worth to note we are about 1.5 years from Wizard and Glass when this came out, and roughly 4 years from the release of Wolves of the Calla, which was the next proper Dark Tower book. But so I call Loman sort of the first of a handful of Dark Tower adjacent stories, also including Black House and From a Buick 8 that sort of bridge the gap between Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Calla. And when I consider my own experience reading this book, I bought it the day it came out at the mall where I also worked, and I was so into Low Men in Yellow Coats. I absolutely loved it because I was so hungry for Dark Tower content at that time, because Wizard and Glass was my favorite of the series, and I was so excited to see where it was going. So I knowing very, very little about Hearts in Atlantis when I bought it, I was just so delighted. I was like, oh shit, this is like a Dark Tower book at the end of Low Men. And then I'll say that some disappointment crept in, and now I'll say I actually really enjoy the book. But when I was young, I have to say the pivot post Low Men to becoming all these kind of very sober explorations of radicalism and Vietnam and war and peace and all these things. I was a bit disappointed. I kept it was like Poochie, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory? I was like, when are we going to get more Dark Tower stuff? When are we going to get more Dark Tower stuff? So, although there is some King's Dominion in the later stories, which I'm sure some of you guys picked up on. We'll talk about that next week. But yeah, so I think that, like, did anyone else have that experience? Well, I guess not, because Dan, you read it in 2005, so all the Dark Tower books were out by that point.
Yeah, I read all the Dark Tower books and then started jumping to his other stuff. But I just remembered the commercial for the trailer where it's Anton Yelchin hugging him, and he's like, "I don't want you to go." Like, it's just like burned into my brain.
And then Mac, you've just read this for the first time, so that wasn't really your experience.
Yeah, it wasn't, but I do really love the Dark Tower stuff, and it was kind of funny. I was really conflicted because as much as I was like, "Oh, that's cool," I know who Ted Brodigan is, obviously, because later on,
right?
I don't want to spoil anything, but reading the rest of the book, I absolutely agree. For me, it was like, I don't know if that really works. like I kind of wish.
Which part?
Just the inclusion of all
that none of the other stories have to do with Dark Tower, or that there's this one bit of like
magic.
I don't mind it being like, I was talking to Justin about this a little bit, and he was saying he kind of likes that only Bobby and Carol and Ted, like there's this magical moment, and then the rest of life is kind of just like, dirty and real, and it's
the
like
magic
kind of
is gone. Yeah,
there's a little bit of that. I see that, but for me personally, when I was reading it, because there really isn't a lot of that at all for the meat of Hearts and the stories that come after that, and it's just really these like pretty in your face, Vietnam stories that are just kind of like grim. It is kind of like, I don't know if it quite. I think it kind of undercuts those stories. You know what I mean? To have something like so fantastical, like you have fucking cars that are alive, and then all of a sudden you're telling these really kind of sad stories about like PTSD and these vets and stuff. It's just kind of like, I don't know. I think it kind of weirdly undercuts the seriousness of what he's trying to say with those stories.
Yeah.
But
I have another question later on that sort of relates to this, but I do think it was a really big swing to sort of lead your book off with a story that really provides a lot of the things we expect from Stephen King in terms of, nuanced, impactful explorations of childhood, some cool mythology, some spooky moments, leering figures, and, a lot of great characters, and then follow it up with these stories that are, in many ways, devoid of magic, like very purposely so. I think thematically it really works. Like, I love what Justin was saying to you about, how this movie does differentiate, pre-enlightenment, sort of, if I can say enlightenment, quote unquote, but, pre-enlightenment and post-enlightenment, and the idea that magic exists when you're young and it does fade as you get older, which is obviously a theme that King loves to explore, specifically in it. But yeah, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But, critical reception. This book was mostly pretty well received. Entertainment Weekly, I only pulled reviews that specifically spoke about Low Men, so I don't have a ton. I'll have more next week. But Entertainment Weekly called this story a knockout piece of traditional spookery. And the New York Times had some interesting thoughts about it. They said, Low Men in Yellow Coats shows off King's traditional strengths, his empathy with children's crushes and fears, his insight into the telepathic, seeming emotional hothouse of a small isolated family, and his ability to summon dread out of plain and familiar things. For most of this novella, roughly half the book, readers get what they expect from the King brand name. And then the review kind of goes on to talk about how odd it is to go so deep into the Dark Tower lore in the latter part of the book, but we'll get to that. And then this quote, I'm going to circle back to this one, but I just want to plant the seed in all of your heads, is he said, like the Low Men in Yellow Coats, the novella Hearts in Atlantis is anti-genre fiction, a horror adventure novel that doesn't happen, at least not to the hero. And I think that idea of anti-genre fiction, the idea of a quest that never begins, is something that I find fascinating and something we're going to talk about in a little bit. I didn't have any quotes from King about this story. I have some for next week, as I mentioned, but yeah, I think because he was recovering from the accident, it wasn't He obviously wasn't doing the press rounds. He was trying to get better. And I think his whole recovery process was hell for him. And that's something we're going to talk about later. But yeah, I think it was very, very hard for me to find him addressing this story really at all. So listeners, if you have something, please let us know. Quick synopsis before we dive into the actual text here. In the first and longest work in the book, the year is 1960. A young boy named Bobby Garfield lives in Harwich, Connecticut with his mother, Liz, a widow. He befriends a man named Ted Brodigan, who possesses psychic abilities. He confesses to Bobby that he is being stalked by quote-unquote low men who wear yellow coats and drive garish cars. Although Bobby agrees to let Ted know when he starts seeing lost pet signs that indicate that the low men are near, Bobby says nothing when he eventually starts seeing them for fear of losing his friend. That was a synopsis I found on StephenKing.com, and one of the better ones I saw. So let's hop in and talk about the hook.
Ah, yes. Don't you see? Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future, I can change it. You can change it, exactly.
The hook is where we talk about the themes, and I think there's a ton to dig into here. But I guess before we jump into the themes, though, I'd love to just hear from each of you your initial reaction upon finishing it. What stuck out to you as something powerful about the book or intriguing about the book? And, maybe lacking that, was there something about it that really bugged you? Mac, why don't I start with you? What was sort of your first reaction after finishing the story?
I really thought the ending to this particular story was really good, in my opinion, just because it is kind of dark and grim, and Bobby doesn't have this great grand old life because he had this experience with Ted. He kind of just goes on and gets into a lot of shit. And I always appreciate that kind of stuff. I feel like, personally, having read the book as a whole, even though it's a collection and they're all kind of tied together, I do appreciate that King kind of, in my opinion, lands all the endings here for me. This one, I had a twin brother who I think he kind of had a hard life and ran into a lot of issues, and I kind of saw that in Bobby I saw him and Bobby in the sense that, when he was young, he was full of promise and had all this stuff. And he was very much, I think there was a bright spot there and he had a really great future ahead of him. But it didn't matter, that he had one step ahead, that he kind of knew, he had his mom's number, with having the shine and all that stuff, or not the shine, but, the Winkle?
Winkle.
Moments with his mother where he kind of sees he understands her and he understands where she's coming from. As a child, you kind of grow up really quickly. And I think that there are a lot of kids that grow up really quickly because they have to, and they have to kind of contend with the realities of the world, even though they really should. And I wish they had more time before they had to do that. And it didn't matter that those things were there. It didn't matter that he had Ted in his life and had these experiences where he could have essentially been a better person. Life still got in the way and life still kind of tackled him. And I really kind of, I think it just felt real to me. And I liked that it didn't shy away from that.
Yeah. Dan, how about you?
Yeah, this book, it reminded me a lot of The Body, kind of how I felt after that, when just this idea of kind of letting go of childhood and the actual pain of nostalgia. I was getting kind of depressed at certain points just because I always hate hearing about kids growing up poor or wanting, and it's he just wants a bike, and it's yeah, but you're just not it's that guys like us thing. It's sorry, your parents don't have money, you don't have your dad, and it's just that disappointment. I remember one of my neighbors growing up had a remote control car that he was so proud of, and then it just broke one day, and you could just tell he was it's gone. It was just, I felt so bad for this kid. Just
can't get another one.
Yeah, because it's too expensive, and it was just man, that just sucks. So I think reading it now too, much older than I was about 15 years later, as you start to age, you start realizing oh yeah, there is something different of looking back on youth, not while you're in it, but as you get a little bit older, closer to middle age. So it was good. It wasn't overly done and melodramatic for me, but it was just, and I think I watched the movie right after finishing reading it too. So it really just cemented home that, it's sad to see kids have to grow up maybe before they're ready to. But it also got a lot of the sweetness. Like I thought, like, you know, the kiss scene was very cute and just little things like that. What about you, Anna?
Anna, how about you, Anna?
On the kiss scene, I was going to say, there's no, by my reading, actually no pound cake in this story.
I've got a few, but they're small morsels.
Yeah, I mean, for a King book.
Yeah.
I mean, he has enough farting to make up for it, I think. But as far as like King's obsession with various bodily functions, you know, it's mostly farting. I remembered the ending vaguely when I was reading this, and I was kind of steeling myself for it because it is really sad. I identify with Bobby a little bit, you know, because I grew up with an alcoholic mother who was very, I mean, she was also divorced, a single mom for a while, you know, a fairly long time. And we weren't poor, but, you know, it wasn't a free spending time. And she, I think, in that period of her life, wanted to be a good mom, but also had to take care of herself, you know? And also alcoholism is kind of, it sounds cruel, but it's a little bit of a full-time job. Because when you're not actually working, you're protecting your drinking and you're, you know, protecting the ways that you can drink. So I feel like she was selfish in some ways that I see Liz being selfish. And I was confused by her relationship to me in the same way that Bobby is confused by that relationship. Because like there were times when we were close. We were very, very close. And then there were times when she felt very, very far away and almost resentful of me. Yeah. You know,
that really aligns with the story too. Yeah.
Yeah. And also I had a bad year. This the other thing that sort of, at one point, I, having earned all straight A's all my life, been, you know, Gold Star girl up in elementary school and junior high. I actually, my freshman year of high school, just decided not to do that anymore. And skipped school and didn't study and hung out with people who also didn't do those things and, you know, didn't. Like, I remember getting a test back in Spanish class, which is, I mean, like, I grew up in Puerto Rico. I don't speak it fluently, but, you know, I should have done pretty well. And I got like a C or a D. And I remember thinking, oh, so that's what that's like to get a C or a D.
Yeah.
And, I mean, my dad kind of pulled me out of that tailspin, but I feel like I understand how you go from one to the other, and it has to do with just one. I mean, it's like pop psychology, but it has to do with wanting attention. Yeah, you know, and like if you're perfect, if you try really hard and you try to be perfect, and that doesn't break through, then fuck it, like go the other way. Yeah. If no one really cares how great you're doing, if no one sees how or not no one, if your parent isn't recognizing your specialness in the ways that you excel, and you're working really hard to excel, or at least like you think you should get some credit for it, right? Like, see how smart I am, Mom. Like, look at all this I'm doing. It's just real easy to decide, I guess I won't work at all.
Yeah.
You know, because no one cares, or not no one again. That's the way I thought of it. And clearly that's still the way I kind of think about it. But since my mom doesn't care, why should I work so hard? Mm-hmm. I went to go live with my dad. That's for the end of that story. Sure. And my dad cared a lot, and it was a very different thing. But yeah, I'm glad that a lot of colleges only look at high school transcripts from 10th to 12th grade, because my 9th grade year was
didn't think about that.
Not a good year.
Yeah, I thought though, that theme of the relationship with the mother was interesting. Because it's a good time to talk about it now, but, you know, King's father walked out on the family when he was 2 years old. So he was just raised by his mom. It's Nellie Ruth Pillsbury King. And as I was reading it, I was wondering if this was a means of how he could kind of connect with his mother. And you wonder if some of these scenes were just him kind of saying, you know, this is what happened to me in my childhood. And you can see how he tries to, latch on to Ted kind of as a father figure in his life.
Oh, yeah.
And how it's just not a great situation for him there. But I watched the PBS Finding Your Roots, which is where they do like a DNA test and they kind of go back and trace your family. Yeah. So they were actually able to find Stephen King, like going back like multiple generations, because they didn't know much about his father. He said kind of once his father left, he just didn't know anything. And I'm sure there's that resentment, like, is in the book where, the mother's constantly like trashing the father because she obviously has a different relationship, whereas he only hears things secondhand, and every kid wants to hear something good about their father. So, when he goes to the bar and they're like, oh yeah, your dad was like a generous, nice guy, always made us laugh. You can just see he was like, I've just wanted to hear something positive about him for so long. And I really wonder if King, he had to have been thinking about that at the time.
Yeah.
It also makes sense, Randall, that you said that. I mean, I know that obviously he was in the accident, but maybe there's not a lot of stuff about it because it was close. It was too personal or something.
Yeah. I think it's a deeply personal book, both from the childhood perspective and obviously the college perspective, which we'll talk about next week. But I mean, I think that is probably one of the more autobiographical King stories is Hearts in Atlantis. And I think, too, there's just a really healthy dose of his own life in here, especially with just how nuanced I think the relationship is between Liz and Bobby. And I remember I was at the perfect age to read Low Men, I think, when I was younger, because around the time I read this was when I think my own innocence was waning a bit in terms of how I viewed my parents. My parents are great for the most part. I have a positive relationship with them. But around the time I read this in, the late 90s, my parents, there was a lot of loss in my family. Many people died. And a lot of, I think, demons came to the surface. And I saw my parents unvarnished in ways that I never had before. I started to understand that my mom had pretty severe depression, and I started to see that my dad's anger issues had a lot of reasons behind them, and I started to just kind of get glimpses into their families and their past and their general experiences that really colored my perception of them as my parents, and I started to just see them as people. And I think that's an experience a lot of people go through with their parents, where they that relationship fundamentally changes. And I think this book is a really wonderful illustration of that, but it's also tremendously sad because it, Low Men in Yellow Coat specifically is a story about the magic of childhood fading once the realities of the world start crowding in, and how the realities of the world are always there. They are the low men, they haunt the edges of your existence, and they slowly work their way in. And what those things are is, to take a line from Hearts in Atlantis, the story, is information. The more information you gather as you get older, and the more you begin to process that information, the more the world loses its luster and your relationships lose their luster, because everything becomes complicated, and things that you thought were simple are no longer simple anymore. And, one thing that I think really breaks my heart in this story is, at the beginning, all Bobby wants is a bike. Like, his life is so simple. He's just trying to raise money for a bike. And he thinks his mom is being a jerk, just being, a run of the mill jerk when she says, no, you can't use your bike money. You have to, you've earned this money. That's the money that you have to use. But what he comes to understand about the way his mom, her suspicions about other people is, and her, anger at his dad, and her, the financial realities of the family and what dire straits they're in, all that stuff begins to take dimension throughout the story. And all of that, just kind of, and I remember almost being disappointed as I was reading the book. I'm like, they never touched on the fact about the bike. Like, did he ever get the bike? And I think the sad thing is that no, because the bike doesn't matter anymore as he got older. Like, that sort of thing, those simple desires and pleasures kind of fade away once the world, you start to see sort of the real darkness around the edge of the world. And because we see a lot of stuff here, we see, I think just a really huge theme in this is loss of innocence. We see a lot of bullying in this book, and we see the way that bullying can lead to violence on both ends. Bobby begins the story scared of the older boys, and then when the bullying becomes violent, he becomes violent in turn. And in doing that, shatters a good portion of his own innocence. Crushes turn complex. You know, him and Carol are, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend in that very amorphous way that children are. But by the end of the story, it's not that simple because too many outside factors start creeping in, and you can't maintain that sort of innocent love anymore. And just various resentments take root. And I have a lot of thoughts about resentment as it exists in this story. So I'm not going to dig too deep into that. We'll touch on some of that stuff in a little bit. But there's a quote on page 191 of my edition. It was the Kindle edition. And it's Bobby thinking, what if there were no grown-ups? Suppose the whole idea of grown-ups was an illusion. What if their money was really just playground marbles? Their business deals no more than baseball card trades. Their wars only games or of guns in the park. What if they were all still snotty-nosed kids inside their suits and dresses? Christ, that couldn't be, could it? It was too horrible to think about. And but again, I think that speaks to what I was discussing, which is the crumbling of the wall that exists between parent and child when you just become two humans who share a space together, you know? And yeah, so I think loss of innocence to me is the theme that I think really stood out. But I want to talk too about Bobby and Liz specifically. We already started touching on it, but like Anna, you mentioned this idea of a resentment a parent can have for a child. Like, where do we think Liz's resentment of Bobby comes from? What do you guys think?
I mean, he says pretty, directly that he looks like his dad.
Yeah.
Right. And beyond that, I mean, I have a little bit of a problem with how he portrays Liz. I do think King, she's the bad mom is something of a familiar figure.
Oh, yeah.
In King works. And I think sometimes he gets the nuance there and sometimes he doesn't. And I feel like with Liz, we come to feel sorry for her, but I don't think we see any of her good qualities or we don't see much of her, whatever part of her and a part of their marriage led to them having a child together.
Yeah.
Right. And we never get a spark of that at all. Like, I mean, I guess it's implied that, at some point she was fun loving and he was fun loving, but I would have liked to have like something that at least showed us who she could have been.
Yeah. And I understand.
Because right now it just seems like she's a fucking miser and she's always been a miser and she always hated his dad. Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no indication in the book that she ever loved his father, like, at all.
Yeah, to that I would just say I agree with you. I feel like that is sort of the relationship between his parents is frustratingly vague. But and this is not, I think, a defense necessarily, because sometimes when things exist as they do within the form or the structure, that doesn't necessarily absolve what it is that you are missing from it. But I think, to me, it speaks to the sense that he can never know that version of his mother, like she's already so far beyond that. And I
also feel like, I'm sorry, like,
oh no, please go. No, go ahead.
What are you really thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing this from Bobby's point of view, but Bobby has a pretty nuanced view of people. Like, right. And he also, we are told multiple times that he loves his mom, that he, beginning in the story, we don't see what he loves about her.
Right.
We are never shown a situation or a memory where everything is hunky-dory between them and there's the feeling of love that he goes searching for, that he misses, that he wants back.
I think sorry, go ahead.
I think that is just, it makes me feel like she's a little, I'll call her two-dimensional, more than one-dimensional. But, and I guess, reading through the lens of being on the lookout for some, patriarchy, it feels, there's some parts of her portrayal that feel sexist to me. I mean, maybe just true to the times, but yeah, I just wish that she'd been more, that there'd been more. So
I was going to
Mac?
say, no, to that point, it's funny because they're with the idea that, Ted can pass on this, ability to Bobby, and does. You would think that there would be multiple opportunities in the story where when he does connect with his mom, and it's not just about seeing what these men did to her and all that. Well, I know Carol's the one that does that, but that maybe there was a moment where he sees like the real relationship that she had with her father, or that's a moment where they could have shown the good stuff that they experienced together, but from her point of view, like when she really did love Bobby, maybe, and everything was fine and everything was good or whatever. Like, to your point, we see that kind of side. We see the good, quote unquote, Liz or whatever. But they don't do that. And I think that
right now she's almost purely a villain, right? I mean, like, she's a somewhat sympathetic villain, or at least we feel bad about what happens to her.
I mean, yeah, like, I didn't get villain from her because I can see what you're saying. I think she's a villain through the lens of, a 12-year-old boy. Because she doesn't.
Well, we're reading through Bobby's eyes,
right? And that's what I'm saying is it is through that sense. But I think the text itself paints a portrait of her that the things that are villainous to a child are not necessarily considered villainous to somebody who has grown up or like understands to some degree what she's going through and what she's sacrificing to help make his life. I think that I do think the text perhaps overplays her hysteria at certain times, in terms of how angry she gets. But I do think that the relationship as it exists, we do get moments, I wouldn't call them tenderness, but I think moments of sort of a lived-in comfortability between Liz and Bobby several times, just in the ways that they interact in the moments when she is in a good mood. But I think Bobby does, to some degree live in fear of her. There's a quote that I loved. He says, it says, he was more than a little afraid of his mom, and this fear was only partly caused by how angry she could get and how long she could bear a grudge. Mostly it grew from an unhappy sense of being loved only a little and needing to protect what love there was. So I think, the love that does exist, I think I agree, but that's the thing is, like, Bobby worries that she doesn't love him. And that, I think, speaks to a more existential fear that he carries, because he feels that she is unknowable, I think, in some ways, because he's so scared of her anger and the walls that she puts up. But
I think with that, too, she definitely, like, is a sympathetic person. She's in a tough situation, and it makes sense why she would resent, in a lot of ways, like, Bobby makes her have to go to work, right? She's a single mom, and she has to work, so she has that double burden. But I do think she does make a few very selfish decisions. One of which is really bizarre is the fact that she's a little suspicious of Ted possibly being like a child molester. But yet when she has the work seminar and she's like, well, I can't get anyone else, so I guess I'll just leave you with this guy who I already have some weird feelings about. And that's where I'm like, okay, that's not what you do with your kid. Like, that's a pretty crazy scenario to just be like, you might be a sicko, but it's really hard to get a babysitter on such short notice.
Yeah, I mean, that tracked to me in terms of, like, yeah, I think there is a bit of selfishness that is interwoven into the character, but to me, it almost felt understandable or justified because she's in this really dire financial situation, and it's
is she?
Well, I think so. I mean, that's what we're told. I'm gonna,
right, but
it's implied that she's hoarding. She's like a miser. That she's not actually that poor. That she's using it as an excuse. She buys dresses. Right?
Oh yeah, I guess you are right.
That's actually
she's got all that. Those
she has the Sears
away.
catalog full of like bills taped to the pages. That's what I mean. Like, I don't. I want to say something about that real quick too, just before I forget that. I think there is a way that a lot of mental illnesses, and I do think that hoarding and having this level of like anxiety or whatever is a kind of mental illness. Like, it's like an addiction. I mean, I think growing up, I just want to say, I think that's why I feel so drawn to Bobby as a character, is I think that half absent parent, it's like as though she was an addict for money. you know.
No, addict for money is an interesting way to frame it. And I think that does, I guess if you look at it through that lens, it helps justify why she would take advantage of this work trip, because she is, suffering and sacrificing in this job because she thinks it can lead to something better and more power for her, and the ability to rise up within this company, and something she hasn't been able to do, and perhaps something that Bobby's dad, maybe didn't allow for her to do, and offer her those opportunities, which is why she's so desperate to do it. But yeah, I think that just makes her, to me, more realistic and more interesting, is this sense that, she isn't an ideal mother. She does have a lot of selfishness that she carries, but I think there is sort of a bond that exists between her and Bobby that it isn't tender, but it feels, I guess desperate in a certain way, that for as angry as they get at each other, I mean, that's how the story ends, with the two of them sort of laying in bed together and saying, well, I guess we have to go through this together, whether or not we like each other. So I feel like there's a lot of discussion about Liz being somebody who, like, I have this quote here that I wrote down. Liz's opinions of people hardened swiftly. When she wrote bad under her mental picture of you, she almost always wrote in ink. If Mrs. Evers had saved six kids from a school bus, Liz Garfield might well have sniffed and said they probably owed the pop-eyed old cow 2 weeks worth of milk money. I just think a lot about the idea that she doesn't like very many people, because I think she's probably been conditioned to distrust people. And sadly, Bobby gets the brunt of that, but she also needs him as much as he needs her. So it's a very fraught kind of love. And I guess that's something that just speaks to me.
I also think you mentioned that they're laying in bed together. I think there is something kind of weird, a little bit Freudian in that relationship.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's another sort of parallel with addiction, which is, shitty boundaries. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's not exactly subtle. It did make me uncomfortable, and I don't know what the intent was there, but I think it's kind of accurate that that's something that could definitely happen in a household where, boundaries aren't maintained, mm-hmm. and there's erratic discipline, which is the thing like my mom did too. Like the discipline is never feels quite appropriate to the to what happened, and also that you're given a ton of freedom, but then also restricted in weird ways. So anyway, I nodded when I said Freudian. So
the Freudian thing I think is accurate. There's a scene when somebody asks Liz or Bobby what his girlfriend's name is, and he says Liz, right. And then he stops and he's like, and the way that it's framed is that was almost an unconscious response that came out. It wasn't something, And that's me. I agree, Anna. I like you framing it through the lens of boundaries, but because that was something I never quite grasped was what he was going for with that, because there's also the obsession with the idea that Ted or any other adult could be a predator, is something that lurks throughout the story. So what were you going to say, Mac?
Oh, no, I had it in Pound Cakes. I thought it was weird, but it's the page 19 where he's talking about Carol. She wouldn't have jumped out and given him that kiss if she did, and it had been a good kiss, a smackaroo or whatever. And then he says better than the one his mother had given him, actually. And that's the fact that he brought that in, the idea that his mother's kissing him, and he's comparing that with his girlfriend's kiss and stuff. It's like, but also to speak to the addict idea of that, even at the end, even after she's gone through this stuff and maybe regrets outing Ted to the Lowman, she still lies to Bobby about the money. And it's like, it doesn't matter that she knows maybe what she did was wrong. She still feels the compulsive need to lie about what she's doing, even when, well, I guess she does take the $300, right? So she doesn't want Bobby to know that. But it's kind of strange too, because it's like you have this moment where that Bobby has this insight and maybe kind of knows the truth about things, and you're still going to try to lie to him. So and in the face of that, you're still lying. So it's like, that is the addict quality.
Well, it's gaslighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a line too. I think I'm putting a cap on the Freudian idea is, at the end of the book, she says to Carol, "Is he your boyfriend?" She laughed. "Yeah, good for you, but I'll let you in on a secret, sweetheart. He's just like his daddy and your daddy and all the rest of them," which I thought was, a horrible, mean thing to say to children who are engaging in innocent hand-holding love. But yeah, it's a very fraught relationship, and I think it's interesting the way that King sort of uses the winkle, as he calls it, I guess like a small little bit of the shine, when Ted has the ability to sort of transfer a little bit of this psychic power to Bobby, and Bobby has that moment where he is able to see what actually happened with Mr. Biederman, her boss, and the other men on that trip. And it's kind of just I think that's a really, clever storytelling way to actualize in that moment when you do start to see your mom for the, or like anybody, like your parents, like for the complex realities that exist in their life that bleed down and roll downhill to you and shape that behavior as they, exist with you. So yeah. Any other thoughts about Bobby and Liz?
Kiss for mommy.
Yeah, and like this quote right here, I think really speaks to it, because it's kind of like the third eye opening, right? Like once it's open, you can't close it again. And there's this line where he says, he looked at his mother's battered face and kissed her hand again. He knew her so well and he didn't want to. He longed for the window in his mind to close, longed for the opacity that made love not just possible, but necessary. The less you knew, the more you could believe. And I think that in many ways like speaks to just the general theme of the book, which is, once you learn these things about the world and about people and about the people that are closest to you, it's impossible to let them go. And I think those are the things that send people down very dark avenues in life. I mean, I think that's something that they tease several times in the story, is that Bobby wouldn't grow up to be, like a quarterback, or he wouldn't grow up to date Carol. He wouldn't grow up to be a successful whatever. He has teenage years that are filled with juvenile detention centers and trouble and robbery and theft and all these things. And King, isn't shy about telling us that that's where this is all going. This is not a book where he is withholding about what happens in the future really ever. But we can talk about father figures a little bit too, because I think the greatest resentment that Bobby feels for her near the end of the book is that she essentially tried to rob him of two father figures. And I mean, it speaks to what you were saying earlier, Dan, which is that concept of telling Bobby, oh, your dad didn't leave us with much. He was a gambling addict. He was all of these, really horrible things. And then when he goes to that bar and he meets these people that knew him, and they say all these really not like effusive things about him, which I liked, but just like, oh yeah, he was cool. Like he was a fun guy. He would buy people drinks unless they were an alcoholic. And he's so desperate for, like you mentioned, just to hear this one good thing about his dad, that he really latches onto that. And I think that in itself will breed some resentment, because he's like, you've been hiding this side of my dad from me. And then later, the way she kicks Ted out, I mean, Ted sort of served as this other father figure, this masculine presence who was teaching him about literature and about the world, and giving him a job for the first time. All these sorts of things. And he was booted so heavily to the curb. And I think that just that loss of these father figures, like there's really no, I think for Bobby at least, that is, one of the greatest sins. Yeah. I have this line where they write, Bobby put his hand on her arm and lightly kissed her cheek. He smelled her hair, the perfume she was wearing, her face powder. He would never kiss her with that same unshadowed love again. And I love that phrase, unshadowed love, because I do think I think understanding the realities of her life as he gets older, it helps him contextualize her behavior, but it doesn't change the fact that it hurt the hell out of him, and that she kind of, made his childhood hell in a lot of ways, but he can't not love her, even though he carries this deep resentment for her. And I think that's sort of, she has like her own version of that too. What were you going to say, Dan?
Oh, no, it's just to go back to the Stephen King and his own father. His mom actually told him to tell people that his dad was in the Navy. And that would explain his absence. To be like, oh, he's overseas right now protecting the country. So at least he had this, I mean, it's actually a pretty good lie to tell, because it's a very believable story. But then like when he was doing the DNA thing, and they found out like he had ancestors who were Methodist abolitionists in Tennessee. And they actually fled the state to get away from this, because there was like 20% of the population of Tennessee at the time was slaves. And you could just see King light up, because it was like, you never want to hear that they fought on the wrong side, but then when he found out like his family actually was like kind of doing the righteous thing, you could just tell he was like flooding with emotions.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it goes to what we were just talking about. Like when Bobby hears the kind words about his dad, he's just like, this is so cool. I've never heard this in my life. But yeah, I think like, I mean, a lot of King, there is a lot of absentees of father, even with like Roland and his father, Stephen, and then there's like a resentment he builds up toward Gabrielle. So it's definitely a theme that comes a lot in his books. Yeah, I think with Ted too, like, because he seems like such a seasoned guy, and I love that, not only does he get the adult library card, but Ted's like, oh, that's a really good present. He's kind of mad that his mom cheaped out and got him something that's free. But I think it's cool too, like, and we were talking about like the idea of like no adults and the fact that he is reading Lord of the Flies, right? There's a lot of these themes that are going into, what if I didn't have parents? What if I didn't have to be around these people? And, for his father never being in the story, he looms large in almost every scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the Dark Tower. Loman's sort of an introduction to a few things we're going to see in the Dark Tower universe in the latter half of it, in the books 5, 6, and 7. Specifically the Lomen themselves, who I don't want to spoil anything, but they have another name that we'll soon learn, and the concept of breakers. And it's kind of funny the way that Bobby gets these sort of psychic flashes, because it allows King to sort of articulate very clearly what it is that Ted is, like what it is within the world of, Midworld or wherever it is that Ted comes from. Bobby obviously doesn't, understand the intricacies when Ted mumbles these things about, the gunslinger and Quartet and all these other things. But he does get this one bit of clarity where he says, there is a tower, he thought. It holds everything together. There are beams that protect it somehow. There is a Crimson King and breakers working to destroy the beams. Not because the breakers want to, but because it wants them to. The Crimson King. And I kind of like, there's something almost like, let me refresh your memory about what's happening and introduce one little wrinkle that we're going to explore more in the further books. I just think it's a really fun
Can you imagine like reading that and not having read The Dark Tower? You would just be like, what is going on? But I'd like to think it would whet my appetite to be like, I need to hear about this story now. But it's just like, what a, left turn, just be like, wait, breaking the beam. Right. And without getting too much away, to like Ted's ability, he's basically called a facilitator. Mm-hmm. And if you think of Rogue from X-Men, where she touches and takes your power, if you touch him, he can give you his power. And that's why he's so valuable, because in theory, with the breakers, he can distribute his power and basically multiply, like a force multiplier, for additional breakers. And that's what makes him so valuable. I feel like you can kind of tell with the Lomen, like they still treat him with a little bit more respect than, they're not just throwing him in a burlap sack and putting him in the trunk. But I think they recognize his gift is so special, and they know that if anything does happen to him, that the Crimson King will not be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to that point, Dan, I that's why I still kind of feel like this is a little strange in the story. If you don't know any of the Dark Tower stuff at all, and you're just reading this as a Stephen King book, it really doesn't fit, especially with the other stories. You know what I mean? It's like, you're just like, what the fuck was that all about?
That's why the idea of adapting this, like, it's such an adaptable story until you hit those moments, right?
Yeah, but that's why I do like that the movie, knowing that the movie excises all, it doesn't have any of that stuff in it, that they're just like essentially bad men. You don't know what's going on, and I think it really works. I think that works to the movie's advantage. I don't think you can have the Dark Tower stuff in that. I think the movie becomes something totally different.
Oh, totally.
You could do it if you had actually made the Dark Tower movies and stuck to that and wanted it to be a part of it. But but it's just kind of silly. But to the breaker thing, it is really cool to me as a Dark Tower fan to now read this, knowing it came out well before all of those books, knowing that King had the idea of the breakers and how that was going to, inform those books way before, you know what I mean? Like, he was already trying to figure it out, even though he didn't get to it until much later, obviously. But it makes me wonder that had he not gotten in this accident, would he have like immediately would we have seen wolves immediately? You know what I mean? Like it sounds
I
like
don't
he was
think
already
so.
on the way.
Well, I
but-
think
or
he
at least,
was, but I
you know,
think he was
gestating.
I think he was very excited about teasing. Like this is when he becomes really, really into the multiverse, right? And like I'm so excited to talk about Black House and Buick 8 because those books really do, in a lot of ways, tease out the ideas that are first introduced in this story before we get to Wolves. I think it was the accident that made him realize he needed to finish these because life is fragile. So,
Right.
Anna, what were you going to say?
I think I'm kind of a good test case for what it feels like to read this without having much experience with the Dark Tower books. I've read them. They're one of the few Stephen King books that I don't feel any urge to reread.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are parts of them that I really like. I mean, on their show about King and recovery, you know, there's a really important passage, and I think it's Wolves. That's important to me, like in my recovery journey. But like, you know what? It's like this is terrible because I know it for King it's incredibly special, but the opening of that first book about like the dark man, whatever, across the desert, I fucking hate it. Like it's so pretentious. It's like it's you know, it's like, so in writing, you guys have heard darlings, right? Like your darlings in writing.
Yeah.
Like that's have you ever heard the phrase kill your darlings? And
Drown the puppies.
I think
Kill the baby.
yeah, I think he should
maybe
have
not the
fucking
puppies.
killed that darling. Like, I mean, it's just not, it's very not him. And it also, it gives you this impression. The books wind up being better written than that, I guess I'll say. But I literally sat down because I know y'all are going to do Dark Tower stuff, and I'm, you know, I like universes. I really do. Like, one of my favorite things about King is the expanded King universe.
Yeah.
So I sat down to reread the series, and I got to just that first page, and I was just like, I can't do this. Like, even though I know it gets better, I know it gets better, but like, I just have no patience for this. Like, because and part of it bothers me that King is so proud of that he's like written about how much he loves that introduction.
Yeah.
You know? So, anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wrote that when he was
sorry. And so, sorry, to get to what it feels like to have that stuff in this book, novel, novella, whatever, and be someone who's not into the Dark Tower. I think I can kind of bring a perspective to that, which is that as a King fan and someone who's used to the expanded universe idea, I think you can almost tell if you're a King reader that that's from the universe.
Sure.
That's not, you know, that it's a part of a different story. And if you're used to reading King, like, you kind of have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, we'll have to have you on the Dark Tower detour coming up soon. My esoteric deep dive into the tower.
I remember just being so thrilled by the Dark Tower stuff in this story when I was a kid, because it was just when I was at the height of my excitement about where the series could go, and just to get these little flashes of it, it was an excitement that was eventually, you know, dulled down into a bit of disappointment and resentment by the end of Hearts in Atlantis, but as somebody who ended up having to wait 4 more years until Wolves of the Calla, but it was but I remember being just so thrilled at the time by these introductions and these characters. I thought the Low Men were so fantastically creepy and interesting, and just the idea that these cars were somehow otherworldly, I think, was something I also really enjoyed, and I'll talk more about that in the cemetery. But
I think that totally works for any King fan. You know,
Sure,
like,
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. Like I said, the audiobook too. So with William Hurt, I mean, he was really being like that, hey, little boy. And it really sounded like someone, they call it like Hume behavior. When those guys try to pretend to be humans. But it reminded me of like that parcel tongue from Harry Potter with that snake language. So it was just, I think those are really cool. And I like that they seem, even at this time, out of place. Like they sort of harken back more to, like, you know, the 20s, 30s. You know, like these kind of, I guess he was
garish
almost like
gangsters,
like a zoot suit kind of weird guys, you know.
Zoot Taheen.
Zoot Taheen, yes.
last thing I want to touch on is almost sort of a teaser for next week, because this is where I think King ties the themes of this story to the rest of the book, and that's the idea of regret. We'll discuss this more, like I said, next week, but his decision not to travel with the Lowmen and Ted. Like, the Lowmen basically say, we're taking Ted. Do you want to come with us? And they obviously, being mystical king creatures, they know that Bobby's relationship with his mom is not ideal. And they say, what, do you want to stay with your bitch of a mother? At least come with us and you can be with Ted, is what they essentially tell him. And Bobby is drawn to that concept, and it's fear that really stops him. And it's that decision specifically, and King lays this on really thick, that decision to stand by and let them take Ted is something that contributes to, I think, the feelings of alienation and resentment he feels the rest of his life. And it's not that he could have prevented it or not. It's just the inaction that haunts him.
Yeah, he literally says that, you'll be a coward the rest of your life. And it's from this moment on that he knows it, they know it, everyone around him's going to know it.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to read this excerpt. It's a little long, but I think this is some good pieces of writing and just, interesting. I fail, Bobby thought. I fail the test. Let me go, mister, he said miserably. Please don't take me with you. Even if it means your Teka has to go on without your wonderful and revivifying company. The voice was smiling, but Bobby could almost taste the knowing contempt under its cheery surface, and he shivered. With relief, because he understood he was probably going to be let free after all. With shame, because he knew what he was doing. Crawling, chincing, chickening out. All the things the good guys in the movies and books he loved never did. But the good guys in the movies and books never had to face anything like the low men in the yellow coats or the horror of the black specks. And what Bobby saw of those things here, outside the corner pocket, was not the worst of it either. What if he saw the rest? What if the black specks drew him into a world where he saw the men in the yellow coats as they really were? What if he saw the shapes inside the ones they wore in this world? Yes, he said, and began to cry. Yes, what? Even if he has to go without me. Ah, and even if it means going back to your mother, yes. You perhaps understand your bitch of a mother a little better now, do you? Yes, Bobby said for the third time. By now he was nearly moaning. I guess I do. That's enough, Ted said. Stop it. But the voice wouldn't, not yet. You've learned how to be a coward, Bobby, haven't you? Yes, he cried, still with his face against Ted's shirt. A baby, a little chicken shit baby. Yes, yes, yes. I don't care. Just let me go home. He drew in a great, long, unsteady breath and let it out in a scream. I want my mother. It was the howl of a terrified little one who has finally glimpsed the beast from the water, the beast from the air. And this is where I think that the New York Times characterization of the novella as anti-genre fiction enters. The idea of a horror adventure novel that doesn't happen, at least not to the hero. Was this unsatisfying to you, the idea that Bobby doesn't go with the low men, that he does turn down what in other books would be the beginning of the story? Was that unsatisfying for you on this read?
No.
I mean, I think it is something. I'm trying to figure if I'm surprised by it. Mm-hmm. I think I was surprised by it more in the sense of a decision by the author to do something anti-genre than I was by Bobby's actual decision. Like I think the way that Bobby is written up until that point, maybe this is a good thing. I mean, I guess if you'd asked me before that scene which he would do, I mean, what would y'all say if you had to guess?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is I don't think I ever saw him going. I think it's more.
I could see him going. Okay. I could see him going because Ted is so important to him.
Yeah.
Right.
I contrast him with
That's
Jake.
why I could see him going.
Like the way Jake does decide to go, and Bobby's sort of the twinner that decides not to go. But I was also trying to think of the motives for the low men to offer, because they kind of make a joke of like, oh, we can give him as a gift to the Crimson King. But I think given his power, Ted's power, that they're like, look, if we bring your little pet along and that makes you more content and easier to work with, then we'll do it. Because it was a weird thing. You're like, why would they want to bring a kid?
I think that personally, I think that if he had gone, they would have just like ate him. I think that they were just trying to make it easier so that Ted would stop like being a jerk and just come with them. Yeah. But then I think once
I don't
they
think
were
Ted's
gone,
the one being a jerk here.
Well, no, I'm saying from the Tahine perspective. I think that if the Loman took him and they finally got him on board, I think after they were gone, they probably would have just like turned Bobby into another breaker, or just another, I don't think that they would have been like together and going on an adventure or whatever. And I think Ted knew that too, and I think that's why he doesn't step in and allows him to kind of chicken out in a sense. He's also just a kid, I don't think during when that started happening, I was like, ooh, would he go with him? How would that be? But I just think it's such a, like he says, when he talks about like, what if I saw the black specks? What if I saw the true darkness? What if I saw the Loman as they were? I don't think Bobby has been written to this point as a strong character that could like handle that mind fuck. Yeah. So to me, it checked out that he didn't go. I don't know. The way that's written, it kind of made me feel like they're trying to say that Bobby's going to be affected. He is going to be affected by this the rest of his life. And I guess you do kind of see that because he doesn't have, he kind of, I don't know, maybe he doesn't believe in himself as much as he should as he continues. And that's why he kind of runs into all these issues and problems. I think that's a factor, but which is sad. But I also think that if he had gone, I don't think his life would have been much better. I think it would have been probably worse, so.
Well, I think that's also, I think what you just said, Max, speaks to that idea of there's like a line about him making his first grown-up decision throughout this. And I think that speaks to that grown-up decisions are ones where no one wins. You know what I mean? And I think that's sort of what you're getting at there. Anna, what were you going to say?
I guess before I start, and I'll do it in order, which is to say to Max's point about like what would it actually be like if he had gone. I did have that thought too, very similar thought that you did, which is that, I mean, if these people are so terrifying, not people, right? Yeah. I mean, there's good reasons not to go, like, I mean, I also think that I think King might be saying this is another one of Bobby's first adult decisions. Yeah. Because I think, the thing that King says is is literally his first adult decision is when he decides to lie to Ted. Yeah. About seeing the signs. And I think it's pretty clear through King's work, this full cliche to the point of like hilarity. King sees childhood as pure and adulthood as corrupt. Yeah. Right. And Bobby, cowardice, I guess, is a part of corruption, right? Children are brave in a way that adults aren't. And we see that throughout King's work. Yeah. That it would be a childlike decision to go with Ted because it's pretty much only a child that would be like, well, maybe things are going to be okay. Like, right. Yeah. Maybe a child is the person who would say, maybe I can be a hero in this story. That there's a way for me to be the person on the quest, right? That I will, not consciously thinking I will take the hero's journey, but that's what we believe as kids, right? That's what I believed as a kid when I was like reading the Narnia books. Like I was like, I'd totally go through that wardrobe. Like I'd totally, like take all these risks. As an adult, this is C.S. Lewis too, especially because the whole religion thing. Adults are corrupt and adults are more scared.
The only thing that reminds me about in literature too of a journey that doesn't happen is actually in the Game of Thrones series. When Jaqen H'ghar, the faceless man, frees Arya, he basically says, look, you can come with me and I can train you to do this. Yeah. And she has to say, no, I'm not ready to go just yet. And it's that sort of anticlimactic moment. But I think to Anna's point, the Bobby at this point in the story is very different based on the interactions he's had. He's seen people hurt people, right? He saw, Carol get beat. He was going through the gangsters in town and they were ready to hurt a kid. So especially now these low men that, for as powerful as Ted is, if he's afraid of them, he's wiser at this point. He knows that there are people that will hurt children. Right.
Well, and also it'd be different if Ted, in the safety of like the apartment and was like, Bobby, I want you to come with me on this adventure and like do this and this and this and that. But it's not that. You essentially have the devil. I know that's my Anthony Hopkins impersonation. No, you essentially have the devil telling you like, hey, do you want to follow your old man friend into hell? You know, like, like, of course I'm going to be like, fuck no, like, bye Ted, see ya, you know, do your thing. I'm a kid.
See, again, that's what an adult would do. Like kids believe that things that you can be a hero. Adults know that heroes are fiction.
Yeah.
Or
well, not well. Wait a minute.
There
are heroes out there.
Heroes. I believe in heroes.
No more heroes.
Hashtag I believe in heroes.
Yeah, I think what's funny to me is when I read that phrase like anti-genre fiction or whatever, like the idea of not going, I just think about my creative writing professors and how much they would hate that, you know? Like it's like that's just me, like my trauma from my various writing teachers just surfacing, telling me that, you know, various behaviors cannot be in any good writing. And King is at that point in his career where he's like, guess what? They're going to publish me anyway. So my character is going to wimp out at the end and I'm going to write a book about cowardice, you know? That to me is just very funny and makes me say, sorry, creative writing professors, maybe you don't know everything. So any other final thoughts on the themes before we pop on over to structure and format?
I think just I was gonna say just the last one though, like friendship drifting away. And I think that's like when we were talking about the body earlier, it's this idea of like you have this closeness with these people for so many formative moments in your life. And then the fact that, you know, you stop responding to each other's letters, you don't really know what's going on in their life. And, you know, I experienced that here when like friends will live in town and then they'll move to a different city and you're like, you know, we're going to stay in contact. But just over time, there's a way of like, you know, the world does move on and it just kind of strains and you realize it's never going to be quite the same. And that's just like a very sad thing to read about because it makes you reflect on the people in your life that you're like, oh, I used to be so close to this person and now, you know, mistaken for strangers sort of thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing as the book goes on as well that we'll talk about more next week, which is just that concept that the friends you had when you were young will always be the best friends you ever had. You know, even if you were only friends for a short period of time, that will stick with you throughout the rest of your years and you'll continue. Like if there was one thing I'll say that reading this book actually kind of warmed my heart a little bit was the idea that when I think of people that I knew when I was really young for a short period of time, but that made a big impact on me, that I remember them and they probably remember me too. Like that's the thing is I always assume they don't, you know, like, oh, I remember them, but they would never remember me. But the thing is they probably do. And we do have those impacts on people's lives. And I think that's something that's teased out throughout the rest of the book in ways that are really lovely. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Cool. Let's pop on over and talk about the structure and the format.
Look at me. Look at me, teacher. Look.
Here in Structure and Format, we talk about the structure and format. I only have one question because this is a pretty straightforward story. But I do think it's interesting that King, the chapters basically outline the things that are going to happen in each story, which is an interesting choice. It reminds me of like Bertolt Brecht's work or like Dogville, the Lars von Trier movie that would, announce every act with, okay, here's all the various things that happen in this act. I'm not really sure why King chose it for this, but I think it's interesting. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, like Ozark does that, right? You guys watch Ozark?
Yes.
Does it do it? I do watch Ozark, but it's one of those shows
they show the icon in the beginning, and in the icon, they always show like the 4 things that are going to happen. But then by the time you start watching the episode, you don't remember any of that stuff. And I kind of felt that same way with this. I read it, I took it in, and you think like you know where it's going to go or whatever. And then some things kind of like pop into like, oh yeah, I remember that name was in the title of the chapter, but it didn't really matter. I don't think it spoiled anything. I don't think it necessarily was,
I agree,
hindering the way it was laid out. I just thought it was kind of, interesting.
It's like
I don't know. I don't think you needed it, but it to me it was kind of nice because it did help me feel like, the end of this chapter's coming up, and I can take a pause.
Yeah, like some of the examples are like A Boy and His Mother, Bobby's Birthday, The New Rumor, Of Time and Strangers, or Ted Goes Blank, Bobby Goes to the Beach, McQuown, The Winkle, Down There Again,
Yeah, they're
Corner
pretty-
Boys. Yeah.
They're pretty oblique.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they give anything away, actually.
Yeah.
I agree.
It
Yeah.
struck me as kind of old timey for
Yeah.
some reason. Like that's how, like silent movies, I feel like did that interstitially, or at least like I'm not like I'm a connoisseur, but like, it just feels, it feels a little bit affected. But
Sure.
also, vintage.
It feels to me very European or British. It's like the episode would be like, in which our character encounters a dilemma, or even
Yeah.
like Stanley Kubrick with like, Dr. Strangelove, or how I learned to
I
stop
just
worrying,
like-
love the bomb. It's just very like, I think it's fun. I think it's a little cheeky. And I think one of King's strong skills is that the reason he's such a good person to read, and because he makes page turners, right? Because he'll end things right when you're getting like the big reveal, and you're like, oh, I got to get to that. So having these are just kind of like a little appetizer for me. It's like similar to Ozark, where like I try to figure out what it could possibly be about, but then I end up forgetting anyway.
Right. So and again, at the beginning of those shows, I'm always like, I don't want to know. Like I want to be surprised. Like I don't watch trailers, for the next episode, because I just want to be surprised. I don't want to like know the story beats. I don't want to like be in my head about it. But with this, I think they're pretty nebulous. That I wasn't sure, or by the time you get there, I couldn't remember the title. But I do like to think that at the end of each, after King was writing, when he would take a break, that's how he would write. Okay, I got to cover this next, and then just decide to keep it in there.
Yeah, if I'm being generous, I guess my read is, I just think about, this is very much a story that feels as if it's being told, in the future. Like, because we get so much foreshadowing in it. We get so much like he would never see Ted again, or he would grow up to go to juvenile delinquent things. And I guess I view it in some ways as scraps of memory, right? Like, what does Bobby remember from these things as an adult? Maybe it's small things like Ted Goes Blank, Bobby Goes to the Beach, McQuown, like the 3-card Monty guy. I guess like I'm just trying to think about like what could have been his intention with that. And I guess like the best way that I see it is that this is very much a book that is being written by someone far in the future who is reflecting back on this time. And so that idea of reflection and these are the pivotal moments, these are the things that make up the memories.
Bobby
what's
commits
up, Dan?
felony assault.
Yeah, that's the future. Cool. Well, that's all I had in structure and format. And I imagine you all probably don't have more to contribute to structure and format. It's nobody's favorite.
I imagine you don't have more to contribute.
Thanks a lot, man.
Jeez, no more heroes.
Jeez.
Well, I'm just saying, it's nobody's here to talk about that. I will say this does have those little moments that always drive me crazy in King, which is that we spend the whole book like in one person's head, i.e. Bobby's, and then out of nowhere at the end of one chapter, suddenly we're in Carol's head, and then we never do that again.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Moments like that drive me crazy.
I think that's just sloppy, honestly.
Exactly. I feel the same way. Like it's like King sometimes puts he says I like in narration sometimes in books, and it drives me nuts because I'm like, he can only get away with that because he's Stephen King, I would have gotten a C on my paper for that.
Like literally no one edits him, I'm pretty sure. Like I proofread, sure.
Yeah.
He is proofread. I believe that. But we all know.
Right.
What do you mean? I think Tommy Knockers is a picture of perfection.
Well, the thing about Tommy Knockers,
am I going to get Tommy Knockers someday? Have we talked about that?
Oh,
Right?
we've talked
we
about the
revisit
Tommy
it,
Knockers, but it's
we'll-
possible we'll get there. Yeah.
Lord knows,
Yeah.
Lord knows people want more Tommy content. So,
Oh yeah, T-Knox.
okay, cool. Let's pop on over to our next section, heroes and villains.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
Here in Heroes and Villains, we talk about the characters. We've already really went deep on them, which tends to happen because King's so character-focused that I feel like we always talk about character a lot when we're discussing the themes. But I guess, like, what haven't we discussed yet? I guess I'd be curious to talk about a character like Carol a little bit. Carol obviously becomes one of the more important characters throughout, but I don't know, Anna, like as a portrait of a young woman, like in this time, did you think she was, well written or very much the creation of a 50-year-old man?
There's definitely some 50-year-old man POV.
Yeah.
Like what? No.
For instance, she has she kind of has no other things in her life besides Bobby.
Yeah. She's like so obsessed with him.
Yeah, like like we hear that she hangs out with other girls, right? And she has friends, but like I don't know, like all of her thoughts that we are privy to are about Bobby, which is it's the story's about Bobby, fine, I liked her. I liked that she gave Bobby a kiss. I think that that's pretty bold. I can't imagine doing that when I was that age. I also think you know what? I just thought of there is like one major piece of pound cake in this, which is the Bridget Bardot.
Oh yeah.
Save the pound cake, baby.
And yeah. And because I was going to say the one thing that maybe King is trying to just talk about that time when we are both friends with people of, that we might want to be romantically involved with, and we are lusting, over them. And I think he's trying to show that. I don't know if he completely lands it, in part because Bobby has sexy thoughts about Carol, but it doesn't seem to enter into his mind when they're I don't know about y'all, but when I had sexy thoughts about someone when I was a kid and then had to interact with that person, sometimes it was a little distracting and self-conscious.
Sure.
I was made to be self-conscious. I was making myself self-conscious.
Yeah.
And I feel like Bobby's like, yeah, I'm hot for her, but we can just be friends. So, they're boyfriend and girlfriend, but it's a very pure kind of boyfriend. It's a chaste boyfriend girlfriend. They're going together, as we used to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It reminded me of like being a kid though, and it's like I never had any sisters, so there's that period in like middle school where sometimes you'd leave a girl and they'd give me a hug, and I'd just be like, oh my god, this is so good. Like, but also kind of like
Dan was starved.
I was just
for
like, Jesus Christ,
physical touch,
but like the way he kind of plays it off too, because you want to be like act, like you've been there or too cool for school. So when she gives him the kiss for his birthday, and he's kind of like, but like deep down, it's like he loves that, and especially because he's not getting the attention from his mother. So I don't know. I think she's like a very like sweet and like innocent character, and in the movie they have her dressed up as like an angel or a pixie at one point, and I think that's like a good embodiment for her. Is just like she's almost like this creature of pure light in his eyes.
She's magic pixie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
pixie dream girl, but in Connecticut.
I agree that it's all very sweet, but I think I also agree with you, Anna, that I don't think he achieves quite the transcendence with Bobby and Carol that the rest of the book sort of leans towards. There is sort of this idyllic quality between that kiss on the Ferris wheel that is, I think on paper sort of idyllic and impossibly like sweet. But I think the longing for that as one gets older, I think the way that it manifests throughout the rest of the book doesn't quite take off, because I never fully I like the relationship between Bobby and Carol, but I think that it almost feels, how do I phrase this? Like there's just not enough weight to the whole thing ultimately for me, even though they are kids. But yeah,
what is the more romantic amusement park ride scene? Him kissing her on the Ferris wheel, or Mark Wahlberg pleasuring Reese Witherspoon on the roller coaster in the movie Fear?
I never watched.
Yeah, you gotta go with Fear.
I never watched Fear because I heard he cuts off a dog's head.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty shocking.
Nope.
Oh, Randall,
not
there's
watching
some doggy violence in that. Yes, do not watch it.
But yeah, so I do think that works though. The trio of Bobby, Carol, and John, Sully John, they to me, I think, work more successfully, just because even though they sort of each embody various archetypes, Bobby's sort of the I don't know, like a literary kid. He's in his head. He's smart. He's thinking. He likes art. And then Sully John's like the jock. And then Carol is just sort of like the girl. Like she doesn't quite have like.
But I gotta say, I think that kind of rang true to me though, because at that age, that is kind of all we were. We didn't have these complex lives, or you know what I mean? Like I feel like at least when I was that age, I wasn't like, I don't know.
I disagree. I guess I disagree, because one of the things that makes this a good book is that Bobby has a pretty complex inner life.
Yeah.
Like he's torn between a lot of things. And he's also, I mean, this is King being incredibly observant, but Bobby is incredibly observant. And also we're told that Carol is.
Yeah.
And she is.
And we see that more later in the book. Yeah.
And I think that she must have, like, there's that scene where she talks about her parents splitting up. Well, no, it's not then, but when Bobby says something about Mr. Biederman, Carol says, well, if she's in love with him, you're going to have to get used to that. And I'm like, oh, there's a story there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so
I guess.
Do any of you know the David Mamet play, The Cryptogram? Does that ring a bell? It's a good play. This reminded me of it a lot because the cryptogram is told primarily through a little boy who all of this action is happening around him. The parents are having these very loaded conversations. It's called the cryptogram because whenever the kid's around, nobody says what they really mean because they're trying to mask it so the kid doesn't understand. And it's ultimately about the kid coming to understand what they are actually saying. He solves the cryptogram. And then fun coincidence, a kid who is in the movie, who plays Sully John in the movie, was in the original production of the cryptogram in theater, which is just a fun connection. But it made me think about that a lot. But what you're saying, Anna, it just reminds me of when you talk about the observance, they're very observant sometimes without fully understanding what it is they're observing. Like Bobby so often hears his mom on the phone and he knows that she's having these like weird conversations and she's acting really strange about it afterwards, but he doesn't understand the nature of that. And then of course, as he gets older, he does, which is that, these conversations were probably with her boss and were probably non-work related, or perhaps blurring the line between work and pleasure. And so I think those are good points to bring up, is that I think that's a great example of what this book does well is the way that they solve those little puzzles, or these moments of behavior that make no sense to a child that eventually slowly coalesce to make more sense. I think there's moments of that with Carol and especially with Bobby. Whereas Sully John, I think, is a funny character because he's kind of just like the dumb lug, right? Who he doesn't observe in that same way. He's not curious in that same way. Like these things don't affect him in that same way. We learn later in the book that obviously they do, just in a very different way. But there is this sort of romanticization of him as kind of somebody who doesn't think too hard about things, and that inevitably makes him happier, which I think is also something that I know I experienced with certain friends when I was young. I was always the kid who thought too much about everything, and
no,
I know, right? So other thoughts on characters. What do we think about Ted? We didn't really talk about him too much.
I was about to say that that it's sort of interesting that we've gotten this far in the podcast and haven't really talked about the pivotal character, right?
Well, I guess my question
without
is,
whom this wouldn't exist.
Yeah, because I guess for me, there's so much to unpack with Liz and Bobby and, them specifically, that Ted to me just never really seems like a complex character. And that's not a ding. I think the character works exactly as he should. And he's, to me, incredibly likable and a character I like spending time with. But I wouldn't say that I found him necessarily complex. But what do you guys think? How did you react to Ted? Is he just sort of the lovable old man, or is there something beneath the surface?
I mean, I like the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, he's fine. I think there's enough mystery. It's kind of difficult because it's a character you kind of have to keep mysterious because of what he's running from, and the idea that he's playing everything so close to the chest, and because we're only going through Bobby's eyes, except for that one moment with Carol. But I do feel like that's the reason we don't really get to go into him really in depth, other than from how Bobby is seeing this guy. So it's kind of hard to flesh out someone that you're trying to keep kind of mysterious. But from what we get from him and his relationship with Bobby, I think it's very above board. I think it's, obviously I think Liz has the wrong idea about him,
not
but
a pedo.
I do think, but it's also interesting because I was really kind of trying to figure out, because of the Dark Tower connection, right? Is this a character from Midworld that has now lived enough time in our world that knows things, read Lord of the Flies, read all these books? Or is it a character from our world that was taken to Midworld
I thought about this question too,
and now is back? Because I was kind of confused, because he seems to know so much about like our world, but seemingly I thought that Ted was always kind of from Midworld. But anyways, it's a whole nother discussion.
He references the gunslingers, and he says it in a way that he's pretty familiar with them. So in my mind, that means he's familiar with like the politics and the events going on in Midworld versus an outsider trying to comment on it. But it seems like he's like a drifter too, in a way, because he just kind of goes around. He'll get like a large sum of money from gambling, and he says he doesn't know anything about boxing, which would lean that he might be more of a Midworld guy as well. Right.
Or maybe he's just, gleaning through the Winkle, both aspects of both worlds, or he's very aware of both. And they kind of say that with Bobby too, right? Like Bobby kind of half mentions that he kind of has an inkling or an understanding of like the idea of multiple universes already, even though I don't think he's been touched by Ted yet at that point.
Well,
so it's kind of, or has he?
They set that up though. I actually wrote down this quote. They set it up because the book he's reading, Ring Around the Sun, Ted tells him, he goes, Mr. Simak postulates the idea that there are a number of worlds like ours, not other planets, but other Earths, parallel Earths, in a kind of ring around the sun. A fascinating idea, which I just thought was kind of funny. Like, a little nod and laying that groundwork.
As someone who's not as steeped in the Dark Tower series, I didn't get the feeling that he was not of this world. I guess to the extent, I know, since I know about the Dark Tower series, my impression was that he was from our world and then kidnapped.
Yeah.
And brought to Midworld. Maybe for a while. Or I don't know, I'm trying to think if there's any indication. I feel like there was, that this is something that has happened before, that he's escaped.
Yeah, they do say that. I think he has escaped before. I don't know if he's gotten all the way back to our reality, but he has escaped. Yeah.
Well, that would just kind of explain. That would be. That's just how it felt to me, that he was someone who was from this time because of all this knowledge that he has. Because, by the way, I don't know anything about boxing, and I am not from Midworld, so.
Yeah, I agree, Anna. I think, and I do think he's had to have done it before, because it seems like he has a process, right? Like the gambling, the idea of like winning this money, but then he also seems to understand the tactics of the low men as they exist in, say, suburbia, or in just our world. The idea of kite strings hanging from the poles, or the lost pet signs, or the shooting stars by the chalkings on the ground. That to me is some of the coolest stuff in the story, but it strikes me as someone who's probably witnessed these tactics before, from experience.
Yeah, and I like that he refers to it as the Winkle, because Danny calls it the Shining, after Halloran tells him that that's what his grandma used to call it. But I like that it's also been called the Sight. So they all have to do with like light and exposing, right? A Winkle, a shine, light.
Because that was another interesting thing, because we already talked about Bobby a lot, but Bobby says his father called it that, like those insights into. So and then you're kind of like, well, is he just saying? Because I know that you were saying, Randall, they kind of do set that up a little bit, that maybe Bobby is inclined to do that, and maybe that's why the Taheen are kind of like, hey, come with us, because they know that he would make a good breaker, essentially.
Yeah, maybe.
But they don't really go into that enough for us to really dive into it. But again, now we're like talking about Bobby. Ted. Yeah, it is funny that like being the main kind of draw and the main character in a sense, outside of Bobby, it is kind of strange that's not as focused on, or that we don't have a lot to say about the character in a weird way. But
yeah, I have one quote that I wrote down that I thought was interesting, or at least a moment where Bobby kind of thinks about who Ted might be outside of, this house. He says, being this close to Ted wasn't scary, but it was sort of awful just the same. You could see that even if Ted wasn't totally old now, he soon would be. He'd probably be sick, too. His eyes were watery. The corners of his mouth were trembling a little. It was too bad he had to be all alone up here on the 3rd floor, Bobby thought. If he'd had a wife or something, he might never have gotten this bee in his bonnet about the low men. Of course, if he'd had a wife, Bobby might have never read Lord of the Flies. A selfish way to think, but he couldn't help it. But I think that's just sort of the observation of a young boy about this man who, I think he just he's just another guy from a certain distance, but getting up close in that rare moment, we kind of see this child's vision of who this older man is, who is in many ways a mystery to him.
I think it's hard to separate him from Anthony Hopkins too. Just because the trailer was everywhere. And,
whenever he's described thin, I'm always like, right.
Anthony's not thin. He's a sophisticated older gentleman. And it's just, he's such a larger than life presence. So even in the book, I had to keep reminding myself, like, no, it's not Anthony Hopkins.
I kept thinking of him, and I remember doing this when I was a kid too. Like, if there's one thing that sticks with me from my first reads when I was a kid to my adult reads, it's like who I initially visioned as the character. And I always thought about the guy in the Simpsons episode who created Itchy and Scratchy, but then got screwed and was like homeless in the episode.
Yeah, the vagrant.
The vagrant.
Rocket car.
I always thought of him of Ted that way, with like a mustache and kind of unkempt. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think Ted is an interesting character, but he's a magical character. He's somebody who he knows he is there to provide all the things that Bobby wants from a male figure in his life, somebody who knows exactly what Bobby needs in terms of, what his intellect demands and what his interests demand. Like, Ted just kind of fulfills all these roles for him. And so in that way, like, he's like a manic pixie dream old man, in his way. So that's kind of how I see Ted. He's interesting. I like him, but, any other characters that stand out to you or that you remember?
I like the 3-card Monty guy.
Yeah, that's a good scene.
I'm trying to think too, like if he was a low man in the, not in the magical sense, but like a low man. They talk the Dickensian sense of, this guy's kind of like a con man, hustler. And I've always,
but
I think, go ahead.
Yeah, Bobby says that, right?
Yeah,
Bobby says that's what he is.
Yeah, and like I've always like been drawn to like sort of like vaudeville, like fast talkers, carnival.
Yeah.
These people always seem like they were decades hipper than the average person, and that's why they were able to run their games so well. But I like that once he loses, he kind of threatens them, and he's like, well, wait, say I don't give you my money. What are you going to do? And it's just like he's such a slimy character.
Yeah, it was funny. This was the first exposure I ever got to 3-Card Monty, and then I used to teach the play Top Dog Underdog by Susan Laurie Parks when I was an instructor, and that play is all about that. And so I remember like going back to Low Men at the time and seeing how the different depictions of the game were being explored, which was fun. But yeah, I love that scene with that guy. His name I believe is McQuown, and he's a great sort of real life example of the low men that Ted sort of warns about. And again, I see those characters as sort of, and like he says too, that Ted says that like sometimes you don't see them until they're right there. Like they have that ability to quote unquote be dim, like Randall Flagg has. And, which is super creepy in itself. But yeah, for me, they really represent just sort of like the cruel and ugly realities of life as they sort of hover around you. And I like that, when they first see the 3-Card Monty dealer, the parents are basically like, don't engage with this guy, because he does sort of represent the people out there that want to, they want to fool you. They want to play you and game you and steal your money. And it's sort of Bobby's first encounter with one of these people. And this one, he comes out on top because he's got the winkle. But these are guys who kind of primarily exist to, defraud other people. And so I think that it's a really cool setup for, this sort of supernatural low men that we meet later, who to me are these very sinister figures. But, yeah, Anna.
I like that scene as well. And I think King does something there that's a little bit of a pattern for him, which is he takes something that is definitely familiar from our world and non-magical and kind of gives it just a little bit of magic.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a sense of like, this is a scene, this is a kind of life, this is a person that's on the very, very edge of something magical, right? Like the way his ability, McQuown's ability to do these cards, and he semi-hypnotizes people, right? Like Bobby comes to realize like that's one of the things he's doing when he does the cards.
Yeah, I love that.
There's this hint of like there's something slightly otherworldly about like carnival con guys.
Yeah.
Right?
And also
like there's something they're just not quite of this world.
Yeah.
And I think he also does it. King also has this similar. He has a similar take on the communication between moms and sons. And he this is in multiple places where he talks about the low grade telepathy that all mothers have, you know. So I think, but the scene with McQuown is a place where I think he's intentionally doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I like the fact that, you know, it was like his father never saw an inside straight that he didn't like. So his mom says, "I never want to see you playing cards for money." And in theory, it is sort of a card game, but it's more of a cup and ball routine. But he is breaking the rule because he's gambling money on cards. So it's just kind of funny. And I also like how McGowan, he's at the edge of the carnival, so it's not even clear that he even works for them.
Yeah.
Oh,
right? He might just be like hustling in the parking lot, like selling knockoff T-shirts outside a concert or something. So
have you guys ever seen a game like out in the wild?
I grew up in New York, so like they would have it on the subway when I would like as a little kid.
Yeah.
They didn't really clean them up until like the 90s, I guess.
I remember being on a trip to New York and seeing it in real life, which I had seen it probably in movies or something.
Yeah.
I wanted to say I think he's definitely not in the carnival.
Yeah.
Like I think it's another one of those liminal things. Like this is a liminal space, and physically this is a liminal space magically. You know, it's a liminal space for Bobby between adulthood. I could go on. Liminal. I like he's saying liminal. And this whole book.
I follow multiple. I follow Twitter accounts that are just like liminal spaces.
Yeah, I saw
and
one.
I think the whole book is liminal.
Yeah. I saw a game pop up on Chicago on the L line one time, and a guy lost $50. Like, but he seemed happy. Like, he didn't seem to care that he lost because he was just having fun. But he like got completely owned. It was very funny. All right, cool. Any other characters you want to talk about before we pop on over to Misery? Cool.
I was just gonna say, like, just the the gangsters. I just thought there were some fun gangsters in this, where you know, they're bullying a little kid, and they're just like, he goes into their space, and they're like, "You got any money, kid?" And you're like, "What kind of jerk?"
I know.
Mug a child for money. You're like, what's he gonna have? His milk money? Like,
I like the guy in the bar who tells him his crew cut. He's like, "Your crew cut fucking sucks." Like, imagine saying that to a 12-year-old as an adult. What an asshole. Okay, cool. Our next section is Misery.
She died. She just slipped away.
Slipped away! Slipped away! She didn't just slip away! You did it! 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 You murdered my Misery!
Annie!
Here in Misery, we talk about the stuff we hated. Really refreshing. I only have one. I usually have more when we discuss these. Maybe I'm in the minority, maybe I'm not. And I imagine you guys are probably with me on this one. This is a topic we've touched on many times on the podcast, which is King's sort of fascination and fetishization of overweight people. And there's this character, Riandra, who is a friend of Carol's mom, who cannot be discussed without discussing her weight. And I actually thought it was somewhat mean, the way that, like, sometimes it's framed through character and it's just simply grotesque. And I think King was writing from sort of the perspective of McQuown to a degree, but when they do meet McQuown, he's sort of sweet talking Riandra, and he calls her like beautiful young lady, and the narrator basically says, "The beautiful classy dame, 5'5" or so, 200 pounds or so, shoulders and face slathered with pons, laughed happily," which is such a condescending sort of framing of it. And I think what he's trying to do is being like, well, that's, you know, like, that is basically the thought process of McQuown, who is this unsavory figure, but that's me being generous, I think. So, and then just a page later, he has a line about her her uncorseted belly jiggling under her sundress, which is a very King line. I just think stuff like this is always ugly. It's kind of gross, and he always takes it 10 steps further than perhaps any other author would. I think that's something we've discussed many times on the pod, but yeah. Any other miseries?
I was going to say, at least she's a good, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. She is a good character.
I was going to say, she's not a bad guy, because usually he makes a connection between Waite and people being not great characters.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's interesting that even in the scene where she rescues them, he does it, right? Like, he has to talk about what she looks like. And I believe there's something in it, but King does this all the time, which is, it's this weird backhanded compliment where he'll be talking about someone who he's described as in grotesque in whatever way, and then be like, but in this moment she was beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, like, and he stop it, Steve.
Yeah.
Like, just don't do it.
But that was the only misery I had. So, Mac, Dan, any others that you guys had?
No.
No?
I mean, there wasn't anything that stuck out to me that I was like, I really don't want this to be in it. And it's really detrimental to the book. I'm like you guys said, there are some things that are King-esque things that we are always like,
things we've come to expect.
King, what are you doing? But yeah, ultimately there wasn't anything else that really stood out to me that was like, this does not work. Other than what I've already kind of mentioned was I'm not sure all the Dark Tower stuff quite works for me in this. Although, you know, I like seeing it as a Dark Tower head, but still.
Certainly not miserable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's with the size of it. I mean, there's not a lot of excess here, right? It's only 260 pages or so, so I just don't think there was enough time to kind of meander, and it felt relatively
That's
tight.
true.
I thought it was pretty well put together.
Anna, how about you?
There wasn't like a lot that jumped out that I was like, oh, I can't stand this character. Like, I always kind of wanted to know a little bit more about them, which left me wanting more. Which
I will say some of the gang-esque stuff could have been cleaned up. I think. I don't know. It's like it's like Steven, have you ever hung out with a gang? Do you really know what?
It's very much a
the lingo,
rich guys.
Yeah.
I think of Puerto Rican gang. Yeah.
But what can you do?
Anna?
I don't think there's another place to put this, even though it's not quite misery.
Yeah.
Which is the gang rape.
The Biederman stuff. Yeah. That stuff. I have that under cemetery. Yeah. I just find it terrifying.
It's terrifying. I mean, there's a part of me. I mean, what I wrote next to it was that for King, this is subtle.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, part of me was just, I guess he succeeds in making it terrifying without doing something he doesn't have to do.
Right.
But y'all know that there's a conversation started by kind of the Game of Thrones stuff about the use of rape as a plot point, especially in genre.
Sure. Yeah.
And I do find myself questioning like this, like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, I don't want to say it shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Like, it's this violent scene, right? A depiction of violence. Like, if anyone's listening who's experienced sexual violence and you haven't read this book yet, know that there's a very graphic depiction of sexual violence.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And do we have to do that?
Well,
that's the question do you have to have it?
Yeah, because I'm not sure
I think that this qualifies.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, I was going to say I'm not sure it needs to be that specifically to tell this story. Like, it could have been many things.
Yeah, I think she could have just come back, like, and he could have hinted at it.
Oh yeah, there's that, but it could have also just been something that wasn't sexual assault, I think, you know? I think that the thing with I think it's something that I think the point of the event is violence, yes, but it also is people not allowing Liz to become her full self, like the things that she wants to be. Like, she wants to pursue this career, she wants to be taken seriously, and I think it almost would have been enough if it's like, well, if they just made her do their paperwork the whole time. Like, I feel like the same thing could have been achieved almost. I think King obviously was trying to make it more bombastic to help better justify her rage and her anger, but I do think that the ultimate point of that scene was basically just to chronicle, just to show how Liz is mad at the world because she's not taken seriously. She's treated as an object, and she's surrounded by, predatory people. But did it need to be that violent of a assault scene? That's what I think you're getting at, Anna. At least that's how I'm reading it.
Well, that's definitely. And also, just one more point on that, because you mentioned it, I want to make sure it's said, is that scene is what makes us so sympathetic to her. And you're right. Like, he turns the volume up to 11 on it so that her future actions, we kind of have an understanding why she does it. You know what? If we got more sympathy, we could have gotten sympathy for her in other ways too. Mm-hmm. Going back to my earlier point about showing parts of her that are likable, parts of her that really do have an uncomplicated love for her son. And that would be also very effective towards building towards this part where she does this thing that is unexcusable.
Yeah.
Right.
When Carol is experiencing it, when everything's going down with Ted, I don't even know if you need any of that, because you have Bobby's dreams.
Yeah, the dreams are so
that
disturbing.
intimate that's what's going to happen, or something violent is going to happen to his mother, and as a reader, well, it's probably that. And you don't. I don't know if they need to go into the detail maybe that they go into later on. I'm having trouble recalling it. I'm probably just blanked it on my head because it was cemetery-esque. But
yeah, I with that stuff, like, I mean, because like I remember when the talk was going on with the Game of Thrones stuff too, and I'm always like, I guess like acknowledgement is not endorsement per se, and there are like legit evil people in the world, and it does happen, and I think to just completely like excise it from literature, I don't think that would work. But it's, you want to walk that line between having it but not endorsing it, but like fetishizing it, or getting cheap
thrills,
cheap thrills out of it. Like, but I think Stephen can walk that line sometimes. I think here he does. Like, it definitely goes over it, but he is like a horror writer too, though. So like he is facing a lot of terrible things that happen to humans, and it's not his only like way to get scares. But I mean, I think going to Bobby, like losing the innocence of childhood, like what happens to Carol and his mom, he's really seeing that there are people out there that will just hurt you. And I don't think he's a character in the beginning that is even aware of that.
So, and it's something I wanted to ask really quickly about that character, because she's so concerned about Ted being like a pedophile or whatever. Like, I kind of just assumed that maybe she had a similar experience when she was young, that, she was, and they don't go into that at all. Like you were saying, I think maybe they go a little too far, obviously. I don't think they need that description or whatever. In a book that's seemingly, there aren't really, there's some horrifying things in the Vietnam stuff that's like very realistic. And I didn't want to think about those things. It's hard to like look at that stuff and not be like, well, did you need to do it, when someone's like a horror writer, rather than just, writing it. I feel like
I wanted to say, sorry.
No,
I hear what y'all are saying, I think. And I wanted to say, I'm not arguing that should never, ever, ever be descriptions of this stuff. I think it's important for people like us, when we're discussing things like this, to mark it.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
To have this conversation, so that when people are thinking about genre, it requires you to make a little bit of an extra effort to say, was this something that was elegant? Was this something that needed to be there? That's an okay thing to think.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think also, viewing it through the lens of like, I don't know if this was on King's consciousness when he was writing this, because this wasn't something that people talked about, and something that people felt comfortable saying, hey, this isn't something that should, sure people were saying it, but I don't think it was being heard at the level it is now. And so it's interesting to see, to go back, we've been doing this with King stuff like since day one, just saying like, well, does that work now? Like, had he written that now, would that be written in that way? And I do think he does sometimes still do that, but
I was gonna say, like, I think actually with King,
the evolution is interesting. I know in our Billy Summers episode we talked a lot about how there's a sexual assault in that book as well, that we discussed at length about how well it was handled. And, I think, but that was the thing, was what we discussed was how there really has been some evolution in the way that he writes about those things over the years. And in Billy Summers, that's very evident. So yeah. Any other bits of misery that we want to touch on before we pop on over to the good stuff? Cool. Let's talk about word processor of the gods.
And we're going to make a new rule. Whenever I'm in here, you hear me typing. Or whether you don't hear me typing, what the fuck you hear me doing in here, when I'm in here, that means that I am working. That means don't come in. Now, do you think you can handle that?
Yeah.
Fine. Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here?
Here in Word Processor, we talk about the writing we loved, the writing we thought was lovely and beautiful, and maybe even a little bit freaky. Who wants to kick us off? Mac, do you have anything?
I had a couple things. Let me find it really quickly. You read a couple of them, Randall.
Oh, okay.
Like the thing about the people never really becoming adults, that they're just children, and bodies.
I can hop in with a quick one if you're
searching. Let's hear it.
Yeah, go for it.
So I just put a few quotes in my doc, but I like when Ted says, "Good books don't give up all their secrets at once."
Yeah.
And I think being on the show and rereading a lot of the Stephen King catalog, it is interesting to see how, things affect you at different parts of your life in a different way. Or, maybe you've had some experience, so you relate to things. It's like a evolution, I guess. But I thought that was a really good way of encapsulating that sentiment.
Yeah, I've got there was a couple lines that made me laugh that I really liked. One was Liz saying, because this just sounds like something my mom would say, I don't trust people who move their things in paper bags. To me, a person's things in a paper sack just looks slutty. Like, that to me was just a very funny, unnecessary vitriol for something so, innocuous. But that is the kind of thing my mom would kind of say. And then I had another one that made me laugh, which is when... Anna had mentioned the farting earlier, and I love a good fart. So I have, after all the farting happened, Ted said, "Kids think farts are funny. Yeah, to a man my age, though, they're just part of life's increasingly strange business." Which to me is just a hysterically funny way to describe farts.
I actually liked that. I like that too. I have a couple. One, most of them are short little turns of phrases that I love. When they're walking past the pawn shop in down there, he talks about looking at the straight razors. They'd been arranged in a circle, and the result was strange and, to Bobby, beautiful. Looking at them was like looking at something removed from a deadly piece of machinery. And I liked that. I also, this isn't so, I had the thing, what if there were no grown-ups in my process of the gods too? Because money isn't real. He does a great little summer. He loves describing summer in the burbs. And when we did Desperation, actually, I think there's that opening scene in Desperation where he has this beautiful description that includes lawn sprinklers, and there's another nice one in here. The air had that early hazy hush that meant the hot days of summer had arrived. From Asher Avenue came the hoot and rumble of heavy going-to-work traffic. But down here on Broad, there was only the occasional passing car or delivery truck. Bobby could hear the hisha-hisha of lawn sprinklers, and from the other side of the block, the endless roop-roop-roop of Bowser. Bowser sounded the same whether it was June or January to Bobby Garfield. Bowser seemed as changeless as God. I liked.
Yeah.
Love Bowser.
It promised last. Yeah, that I as the mother of a barking dog, I felt a little pang of guilt every time they brought up Bowser. And then this is just a place where I really connected with Bobby when Bobby is deciding whether or not to take the job from Ted, and he thinks about lying to his mom. Ted asked him, "Can you lie to your mom?" And that he was more than a little afraid, which I know you read. Did you reach that mostly it grew from an unhappy sense of being loved only a little?
Yeah, I mentioned
to protect what love there was.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful line.
That just really,
yeah.
That so, as you mentioned, that line about protecting what little love you have, also was really. Oh, and one more thing I connected with Bobby. I believe he describes Bobby's risky red hair.
Oh.
I think I marked that down too. That made me laugh.
I had on page 253, the Bobby scooped up the petals, each one like a tiny silk coin. He cupped them like palmfuls of blood, then raised them to his face. He could have drowned in their sweet reek. Ted was in them. Ted, clear as day, with his funny stooped way of walking, his baby fine white hair, and the yellow nicotine spots tattooed on the first two fingers of his right hand. Ted with his slutty shopping bags. No, I'm just kidding. He says carry handle shopping bags, but I just love that. You know, there are some things where I just, you know, I was going through a lot of my old things the other day after I read this, and I was throwing things out that I just wanted to get rid of or didn't want. And some of that stuff, just smelling it, like really did take me back, and I kind of love that. And then also, it's not as much the writing, but the section where, and I mentioned it before, when Bobby comes back and his mom says, I didn't take the money and I wouldn't do that and all this, and he knows that she did it, but he still kind of now understands where she's coming from. And is, I don't know, I feel like there's been a lot of times in my life where I know what's going on and someone's bold-faced lying to me, but I let it happen because there's a love there, and there's you almost can't break their heart by telling them that, you know, that like from a parent, from like an adult. And I don't know, that just kind of rang true to me.
Yeah. I've got a few other small ones here. I love this little section about Ted talking about writers, this is such a King sentiment, and it's a good sentiment, but it's just something I enjoyed. There are also books full of great writing that don't have very good stories. Read sometimes for the story, Bobby. Don't be like the book snobs who won't do that. Read sometimes for the words, the language. Don't be like the play it safers that won't do that. But when you find a book that has both a good story and good words, treasure that book. Are there many of those, do you think? Bobby asked. More than the book snobs and play it safers think. Many more. By the way, have you heard of this author, Stephen King?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was a fun little bit, but it's King being King a little bit. But it's good. And then I just enjoyed Ted's first description of the low men. Just a short little bit here. Low men, Ted said. I use low in the Dickensian sense, meaning fellows who look rather stupid and rather dangerous as well. The sort of men who'd shoot craps in an alley, let's say, and pass around a bottle of liquor in a paper bag during the game. The sort who lean against telephone poles and whistle at women walking by on the other side of the street while they mop the backs of their necks with handkerchiefs that are never quite clean. Men who think hats with feathers in the brims are sophisticated. Men who look like they know all the right answers to all of life's stupid questions. I just thought that was a fun description of a guy who sounds like not a lot of fun to be around. Any other bits of word processor that we want to discuss?
Yeah, I'd like this one, the about the kiss on the Ferris wheel. And say, it was the kiss by which all of the others of his life would be judged and found wanting. And I think that's like a really great way of putting that, because it's like, you know, the first time you fall in love, you do it because you've never had your heart broken. And then once that happens, you always pull back a little bit and you're always a little more guarded. But that first kiss, you know, it's always like that, wow, I can't believe this. This is awesome.
Yeah, I had a moment too, in the same way that you did, Mac, and kind of what you're talking about, Dan, just remembering something very sweet from my childhood, which was when he talks about the letter that Carol wrote him, and it was on like paper with hearts and teddy bears on it. I just remember when I was a kid, like in middle school or whatever, getting, you know, passing notes to girls, and they would sometimes write their notes on, you know, those kind of pieces of paper. And I remember I like cherished those, like, you know, for some years.
Also, I like that Ted letter bombed him also. You know, it's like you open it and all the glitter comes out.
Oh yeah.
Rose petals.
Yeah, right.
It was magical rose petals. Cool. Any other ones before we move on? Cool. Let's head on over to the cemetery.
What's the bottom of the truth?
Well, sometimes that is better. The person you put up there ain't the person that comes back. It may look like that person, but it ain't that person. Because whatever lives in the ground beyond that cemetery ain't human at all.
In the cemetery, we talk about what freaked us out. And I'll kick things off. Since I just read the description of the low men, I'll read Bobby's reaction when he saw the low men for the first time. Bobby looked around. The low men stood shoulder to shoulder, surrounding them, penning them in the smell of sweat and maggoty meat, blocking off any sight of the street with their yellow coats. They were dark-skinned, deep-eyed, red-lipped, as if they had been eating cherries, but they weren't what they looked like. They weren't what they looked like at all. Their faces wouldn't stay in their faces, for one thing. Their cheeks and chins and hair kept trying to spread outside the lines. It was the only way Bobby could interpret what he was seeing. Beneath their dark skins were skins as white as their pointed Reet Petite shoes, but their lips are still red, Bobby thought. Their lips are always red, as their eyes were always black. Not really eyes at all, but caves. And they are all so tall, he realized. So tall and so thin. There are no thoughts like our thoughts in their brains. No feelings like our feelings in their hearts. Very freaky, very effective description of what could be, I think, in other hands, perhaps silly characters. I think they have a lot of menace and genuine terror in this one, too. And I'll just add that I think of all the sort of trademark tricks they do to sort of communicate with each other, the idea of the lost pet posters and the kite strings. I've since I was a kid, I've always found it freaky. The idea of drawing these moons and stars next to the hopscotch is just to me like a really wonderfully bit of sort of hard to grasp malevolence, like hard to articulate malevolence that exists so close to, something that's for children.
Yeah, I was going to say, I carry around chalk with me, so if I see those, I add stars and moons next to them.
It's like in Mad Men, the hobo code, where the drifters, they mark, a mean man lives in this house, avoid it, or a barking dog. It's freaky.
I want to echo that, Randall. I love the lost pet signs thing. That always stuck with me for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't know the description, but something that really kind of creeped me out was the idea that the Lo DeSoto, the car, was not quite, it was actually alive.
Yeah.
And the idea of seeing that, and the tremors that Bobby gets when they're around, is really terrifying. And that the idea that they might sense that they're there. And we already talked about the what if there were no grown-ups thing. I think that's also terrifying and real. But I've got a few others, I think. But if someone else wants to jump in.
Yeah. Anna, do you have anything?
I want to endorse basically all the stuff that we've already said. The one thing about the cars, I would put the descriptions of the cars in there without an asterisk, but I guess I'm now putting an asterisk on that, which is that we get several people telling us that the cars are scary.
Yeah.
like multiple times. Like it almost is like they're breathing. And he does a good job of like showing them breathing, which I think would be, it's like a show, don't tell kind of thing. And I'm like, come on, Steve, I get it. Like they seem like they're alive. We don't have to people keep saying, I think they seem like they're alive.
Well, have you read?
To be honest, though, I only found them scary after the 5th time they were mentioned to me as being scary.
Anna, have you read From a Buick 8?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's to me where the cars sort of come into their own. That's what I love about that book. But yeah, cool. I have another one here. This is when Bobby calls the number on the poster. Oh, and I always thought the poster was freaky when they're just like, "Oh, we're looking for our dog Brodigan" or whatever. That to me was like the cheery.
He's
tone
mangy,
of it.
but we love him.
Yeah, he's mangy, but we love him. That's like such a great, a very King line to me. I love it. But I love this when Bobby calls. Until this moment, he still hadn't completely believed in the low men. Now something was on the other end of the line, something that had nothing in common with life as Bobby Garfield understood it. Bobby, the voice said, and there was a kind of I don't know this word. Insinuate pleasure. There it is. Insinuate pleasure in the voice, a sensuous recognition. Bobby, it said again, this time without the question mark. The flecks began to stream across Bobby's vision. The living room of the apartment suddenly filled with black snow. "Please," Bobby whispered. He gathered all of his will and forced himself to finish. "Please let him go." "No can do," the voice from the void told him. "He belongs to the king. Stay away, Bobby. Don't interfere. Ted's our dog. If you don't want to be our dog too, stay away." Click. I love that. Although it was easy for me to forget the Crimson King in those moments and just think they're talking about Stephen King when he's like, he belongs to the king now. Like, if King demanded he be
or
called
Elvis,
the king.
possibly Elvis.
Possibly Elvis too.
The rest of his life, he's frightened of Elvis.
Any other bits of Cemetery, Mac?
Yeah, I had the man in the park that wants to blow Bobby is uncomfortable. I could not, and this is in the movie, in the film too. Carol's shoulder when they pop that baby back in is just brutal.
And that description goes
that
on
always,
for a
that always,
long
yeah,
time.
bones and that always makes me uncomfortable when they talk about that stuff. And then not as much what we talked about earlier, where the actual visions that of what's happening to Liz, which is awful, but the idea of Carol having to deal with that, the idea of like a child having to like see that and also process that is just, so terrible.
I think
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think the baseball bat attacks are pretty shocking too.
Yeah.
Because I just remember growing up, like I've been hit with like a bat before, and it's one of those things where you get in a fight with someone and you're like, they're not really gonna escalate it with like a weapon, and then some people are just so insane that they'll do it. Like I remember Halloween once, these kids had like pellet guns, and we're like, they're not really gonna shoot us, and then they like started shooting us, and we're just like, geez. So the idea of attacking a girl with a baseball bat, I like that Ted kind of lifted her up and was like, he must have been terrified of you because you have a heart of a lion.
Yeah.
But then when Bobby, when he attacks, was it Charlie, right?
Doolin,
yeah, Dolan. He like savages him with the bat, and you could kill someone pretty easily. So it's, as it was happening, I'm just like, don't push it too far, man. Like, don't go over the edge.
Yeah. Those scenes were very disturbing, which is interesting because one of the stories we're going to discuss next week is sort of directly related to that baseball bat attack. Cool. Well, now that we've thoroughly scared ourselves, let's make ourselves feel a little better with a slice of pound cake.
After all you've been taught,
Everyone isn't bad, Mama. Everything isn't a sin.
come to your closet and pray, ask to be forgiven.
He's a nice boy, Mom. You like him. You really like him, Mama.
Here in Pound Cake, we talk about farts, boobs, butts, things of that nature, things King loves to write about. Not a ton here, but I've got a few that I found either funny or just kind of cringy. There's the woman Alana who was at the bar. This is he describes, he's kind of fascinated with like her heaving bosom and stuff, but this line just made me laugh. Alana shrugged. Interesting things happened all up and down her front when she did. Just a bizarre way to frame that. I don't know. I couldn't tell if it was horny or not.
I know all my pound cake was more just like bizarre stuff like that.
Do you have one on hand, Mac?
Just like all the farting stuff. Like Ted let out a long sonorous fart that sounded like a trombone.
Yeah, I have that one, and I had to.
The goose just flew out of my ass,
And I had to add that one too because they laugh so much. Well, I'll read. Ted gave him a rueful smile and left the room. Bobby's giggling forced out more farts, a little tooting stream of them. And when Ted came back with a fizzy glass of Alka-Seltzer in one hand and a foamy glass of Hires root beer in the other, Bobby was laughing so hard that tears streamed down his cheeks and hung off his jawline like raindrops. It's well documented how much I get annoyed by King describing people laughing so hard they start crying, which he does in every book, but I still love him. Other bits of pound cake, Anna, anything? Just farts?
The farts, Bobby kissing the inside of his mother's hand at the very end, her palm, like, which to me is a romantic thing to do. Like, that's not a way I would imagine a son kissing his mother. So that was creepy crawly.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say the Bridget Bardot one, but for King, the description of that Bobby harkens to mind in order to distract him from the Loman is actually pretty tame. But I think it's just I immediately underlined it when Bobby saw her shower damp puff of blonde hair, the slope of her breast into the towel, her long thighs, her painted toenails standing over the words adult only, must have driver's license or birth certificate. And I thought I was going to be in for worse than it happened.
Right? For real, right? You're like, how long is he going to be distracting himself?
Yeah, that's actually, and I thought we might get another hard on, which there's a few of those in the book.
Oh, I've got a good hard on.
I've got one too. Go for it, Randall.
Oh, do you guys? Come on. Like, do you really want to Jeffrey Toobin this?
I want to hear it again. I want to hear it again.
We're doing this Toobin style. Okay.
Don't talk about how you have hard on. I don't want to know.
No. Okay. Page 189. This phrase, this is like one of my favorite King things where something serious is happening, and he derails it with like a weird comparison or metaphor that's like really perverted. And I love this. So Bobby found himself looking at Willie's cocked fist. Sometimes Bobby woke up in the morning with his Peter just as hard as a rock, standing straight up like a moon rocket or something. As he went into the bathroom to pee, it would soften and wilt. Willie's cocked arm was wilting like that now, the fist at the end of it relaxing back into fingers, and the comparison made Bobby want to smile. I just think, like, it's a guy raising his fist, and then we get a paragraph about how Bobby wakes up with boners. It's just very funny.
What's funny, Randall, is that's not the first time you've mentioned that.
That's the only thing you could use to describe it. What else? How else are you going to describe a cocked fist? The word cock is in it.
Yeah, and Willie.
Yeah. And Willie,
He also says earlier, he already drives that home earlier. In page 152, he says sometimes Bobby would wake up with his Peter stiff as a rock.
Yeah.
Peter's such a funny word for penis. Dan, any pound cake for you?
Just going back to the poster, I think it's revealing of a different generation that you could just imagine how many hours Stephen King had studied that poster in every little detail, right? Like, he's speaking from experience. And, obviously, like in Shawshank, there's a sexy woman poster. So, it's like these pre-internet guys, you just like whatever you could get your hands on, you were just like, oh my God, I'm so obsessed with it. You know what I mean? Like, he could draw it from memory. And I think that's like an era that we don't relate to quite as much.
Yeah.
I remember pre-internet life as a boy, and it's like, yeah, you would see like a Victoria's Secret magazine, you'd be like, oh my God, like this is insane. So I can kind of relate, but I just, you can really tell, like, he was going in on details on that poster, and he probably held back a lot that he didn't want to say. It could have been its own chapter.
Right. Cool. All right, let's take a walk in King's Dominion.
There's another world out there. I know there is.
Here in King's Dominion, we talk about the connections to the larger world. Obviously, there's a ton of them here. We've already touched on the Dark Tower stuff, but are there any others that stand out? I've got a handful here, but I'll throw it over to Mac. Any King's Dominion that's not obviously Dark Tower related?
Pretty tough, because most of it's Dark Tower related. Yeah. The only things that we didn't really 100% mention Dark Tower related, though, was Ted says, he mentions Ka Mai, which is the Katet's Fool, which is something that's mentioned in Wizard and Glass.
And he mentions, and like, I guess we didn't say, like, he mentions Roland specifically. Like, he says the gunslinger, like, is heading east or whatever. So all that stuff is very deeply embedded in it.
And you mentioned the Lowman when he's like, no can do. He belongs to the king. Ted's our dog. I always pictured when I was reading that dialogue, I kept thinking of the Rat Man saying that.
Yeah.
Like, no can do. He belongs to the king.
The king. The Rat Man don't like
Love it. That's so funny. And then we mentioned it earlier, but the rose petals. So the idea of playing with time and stuff, and when he says, Ted broke free, he must have gotten away or whatever, right? But
no spoilers.
No, I know, but that's what's interesting to me is that I guess keep that in mind for the future. But I'm like, I wonder how time moves and if that does have anything to do with what happens in the Dark Tower. And I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And also it was like, it made it almost sound like Roland and his compatriots were boys still. So some of the time dilation is interesting. If, you know, things could be happening concurrently in these other worlds, but totally at different time periods. But I think the more you read the Dark Tower series, you see that you can jump sort of forward and backward. It is hard to mention things without getting to, because like even the Low Men, like there's so much I want to talk about that I just really can't get into without spoiling the rest of the Dark Tower books.
Yeah.
It's like their behavior though is like, it's very interesting to see these, and I love the idea of them. It's almost like that uncanny valley of they seem human, but even the closer you get to them, you see the flaws in their appearance, and they're like quite literally these wearing human masks.
Yeah, it's very freaky.
Very tiny one, but palaver is a word that I've only heard in Stephen King books.
No, totally.
And then this is, I'll wait for room 237.
I know. Well, I've got a few.
Then, and I don't know, I think this must be deliberate. He mentions the Regulators, the film.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, I was looking online, and some people were saying that was a direct.
Can't find it right now, but
yeah, there's 2 mentions of Regulators throughout the book. I know there's one in Low Men and then one later, I believe, and I believe it is a direct reference to the Regulator story, because the movie and the story. Yeah. So there's mention of the library police at one point. Which is a very pointed phrase in the King canon.
Is that not a room 237 though?
No, because he specifically
there's no real library police.
Yeah, and
I know, but I thought is the library policeman that actual idea?
Well, I don't think in this story he's referring to the library policeman of that story, but the general concept of the library policeman is something I think we associate with Seinfeld and Stephen King. And then do I have any others that are direct? Like when they talk about the Low Men, they talk about, I think Ted mentions that children see them. You know, this isn't sort of a direct connection, but it reminded me of It, which is the idea that kids can see these things adults can't, and that obviously ties into the themes of this book as well. But that to me felt, you know, pretty pointed. And then there is the phrase "other worlds than these" that is used very pointedly. Which is also Dark Tower, but yeah, Anna, what else do you have?
I don't have anything else.
We can venture into room 237 if you want.
Yeah, that's
because I've got a few too.
Who's there? This is real stretch, but actually, well, you'll like it, I think. There's some word pool going down to the word pool. Where Ted mentions specific phrases that he loves, like time is an old bald cheater, and the down there, or is it down there or down here? I can't remember. But like when he describes that neighborhood, and there's a couple other times where Ted kind of talks about these specific phrases that really captured his imagination, and Bobby reflects on that too. And I think King really does believe in that idea, of the word pool,
right? Here's one I have. There's the mention of Don Winslow of the Navy, which was a 1942 Universal Pictures serial film based on the comic strip Don Winslow of the Navy. Was King at that point friends with the writer Don Winslow, who he often retweets onto his timeline? They are very good pals these days and love to tweet at each other. I wonder if that was a pointed reference to his good friend Don Winslow, or if it was just they became friends later and it was a very serendipitous sort of thing. So that's one. Mac, what's a room 237 you have?
Page 141, Silly John says that he'd love to be the trash man. Is Silly trash?
I love it.
And I had that one too, but I was afraid to bring it up. I thought it was such a stretch. You guys might laugh.
No, never be afraid.
Lord, no. Never too much of a stretch for room 237.
There's mention of a Welsh corgi. King's obsession with corgis bleeding through.
Yeah.
Mac, what else do you have?
I just had page 230 was Lynn's car was a Buick, and we all know from a Buick 8 was another book.
Another book.
Another book.
A great connection.
So just like the off. Whenever they mention a Buick, it's just like gold. It's like, oh, room 237 right there. Doesn't matter what it is.
There's mention of I believe one of the bullies is wearing a class ring, which made me think of The Stand when Nick gets
yeah.
beat up by a bully. I call that guy a bully. He hits him and he's got a class ring on. And then I got a big one here. Well, you already sort of mentioned it, but we do have Carol Gerber. We have 2 Gerbers on this podcast.
That's right.
And Bobby's dad's name is Randall. So we're all over this book.
That stuff counts for room 237.
Yes.
It does now.
Like I said, we stretch it.
If it's a personal connection, so that like Bobby's a redhead, so I get to be like, well, that's a King connection because Bobby's a redhead.
Yeah, one of the characters has a
podcast.
Right. He's referencing me
It's been
personally.
well documented that King can travel through time, so I think he now that he knows now then that we have this podcast, and he was directly
we're doing him real proud here. It's like, oh, this character has a vowel in its name, and I have a vowel in my name. One thing was when he goes downtown, one of the kids, when they're playing pool, he does like the finger gun at Bobby, and Bobby does the finger gun back. Feels cool. Maybe
Roland.
Maybe he's a gunslinger.
Yeah,
we have another gunslinger in the ranks.
Clear cut.
Wow.
That one's a prize for me. Like that one wins. Honestly.
All right. Time to go on to our final thoughts.
Dad, can we go now?
You ready?
Yeah, we've been ready for an hour.
Okay, I'll be right there.
You said that a half hour ago. Yeah, my dad's weird. He gets like that when he's writing.
Here in Final Thoughts, we share our Bright Red Pennywise Clown Nose rankings and our MVP of the story. Dan, kick us off. What is your ranking of Low Men in Yellow Coats?
I would. I enjoyed it more this time reading it. It didn't particularly stand out to me at the time of reading it because I think I was just so eager to go through as many King books as quickly as possible. But then revisiting it, there was a lot in here that I said, yeah, like the nostalgia really got to me. You know, I still need to read the whole collection. I give that an overall rating, but for this story, I think this is like the standout story in this collection. So I'm going to give it 4 Bright Red Pennywise Clown Noses.
And your MVP?
Probably got to go with the 3-card Monty player. Or Ted.
McEwen.
Yeah, McEwen. In the movie, Alan Tudyk plays him, and I really enjoy his portrayal.
Oh, nice. That's perfect casting.
That's great casting. Yeah, that's
really
perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
Mac, your Bright Red Pennywise Clown Nose ranking and your MVP.
Yeah, so this is my first time reading this story, and I do really like the film, so I was kind of holding it against that, and it checks out for me. Because it is just kind of like a portion of the story, and as you know, y'all will continue reading the book, and you'll see that. But I can't really give it more than 4 Bright Red Pennywise Clown Noses because for me it rang true on some things, and I was maybe projecting some of my own personal life. But you know what? Everybody does that when they read something. But I do love mostly how it's written. I do love the characters, and I love Ted and Bobby's relationship, and I don't know if I think it loses the nose because I still don't know if it quite works the Dark Tower stuff in the book as a whole with against the backdrop of the other stories, but yeah. So for me, it's 4 bright red Pennywise Clown Noses with maybe a poster of a missing cat on top.
Who's your MVP?
My MVP is that's tough, but let's say Bobby. I don't know. You know, it's kind of sad. I having seen the movie first, I can't unsee these characters as the characters from the film, the actors that played them, and so there's just like that Anton Yelchin twist. There's just it just gets me, and it brings the extra level to it when I was reading it. That was just kind of like made me kind of sad. But yeah, I love Bobby. I think he's just kind of such a perfect little monster.
Anna, your Bright Red Pennywise Clown Nose ranking and MVP.
I'm going to go with 4 Bright Red Pennywise Clown Noses. I can't actually articulate why it's missing the last one. but maybe just because it just falls short for the reasons that we've discussed. There are some problems with the story. I think, again, as someone who's not a Dark Tower head, I actually think he pulls it off. It's interesting to me that y'all are more iffy on whether or not that fits here, because I think you could read this as someone who doesn't. If you knew King, as long as you're familiar with King's style, I think the appearance of something from another universe is not going to bother you.
Oh, well.
But
yeah, no, I'll cut in after. Sorry, go ahead.
And also, it didn't occur to me until after I finished the story that it really is mostly about relationships. It is mostly devoid of magic. And I've sometimes wondered how to describe my reading style because I don't read a lot of high literary fiction, because I read so much heavy shit for my day jobs. Like, I read basically nothing but genre fiction in my free time. Like, you would have to really push me. I think the last thing I read, it was like not genre, was like a Jonathan Franzen novel, which I wound up not really liking. But I really loved The Corrections, but it was the one set in St. Paul, actually, that I wound up not liking that much, which I can't remember the title of. Anyway, but this reminded me, like, oh yeah, Anna, you can enjoy things that are mainly about like a relationship that doesn't have anything to do with magic or dragons or evil people or serial killers or whatever. Yeah, I mean, because if I had to give my MVP, I think it's, can I name like The Relationships as my
why not?
MVP?
We have no rules here.
Because
judges.
Yeah, because I think the one between Bobby and his mom is problematic to me, and I've mentioned why, but again, it completely resonated. I know the feelings that he's talking about, and he does a great job of describing those feelings, like that to protect the love that you do have thing. And also the connection with Ted. I also know what it feels like to think that you found someone who will take care of you, who will protect you, you know, who will be there in a reliable way, and then have that person disappear, whether it's their own doing or not. And that feels, I mean, maybe everyone knows what that feels like, but it can be that just having that happen in this story, if there's no magic involved and there was just this kindly old neighbor who was really cool and then had to leave, like, that would be a great story.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Relationships.
Love it.
My MVP.
I'm also a four-noser, straight four noses across the board. I really love this story. I project a lot onto this story. Like you mentioned that earlier, Mac, and I definitely do, because I think I'm somebody, especially when I was, you know, younger, like in college and stuff, I sort of, I think, fetishized the way that I felt I became jaded at a certain age because I began to know too much about too many things that my ignorance of them were the things that made me happy. And I think that this is a really beautiful chronicle of that moment in somebody's life. And I think the way that King is able to tell a story that dabbles in magic, while also, you know, primarily making it first and foremost about these relationships and about this pivotal emotional moment in someone's life when everything gets complicated. That's a tough feat to pull off. And I love it for that reason. I think it's a really great book. Yeah, I think in places, in the only sense that I think it's like I didn't give it that final nose is that I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say like every character quite works for me. And I think that perhaps the weight of Carol and Bobby specifically, it doesn't quite get there for me. And then the relationship with Ted and Bobby is really lovely. And I love how it's teased out, but Ted to me still seems like not quite a fully fleshed out character. But I think that even if it doesn't quite all land, the stuff between Liz and Bobby, that stuff to me is so naughty and so not naughty, although it kind of is with all the Freudian shit, but like KNOTTY, naughty and difficult material, like this whole concept of just resentments that exist between mother and son. It's tough stuff, and I think he handles it really exquisitely by and large. And so I was very moved by this book. And the rest of this book, I talked about this in the Discord, but like, man, like this book bummed me out, like not in a bad way. It's just depressing shit. Like when you really get into it. And, I'm excited to dig more into that next week with a light touch, of course, because that's what we do on the Losers Club. So 4 noses, and my MVP, it's got to be the Lowmen. I love the Lowmen. They're freaky. And I think this is honestly, as they manifest in other King stories, this is my favorite depiction of them. I don't think they're great in the Dark Tower. They get the most
to do here, right?
Yeah, they get a lot to do here. And you'll sort of see what their place is in Dark Tower as we move through the Dark Tower books. But I think this is my favorite because I think just being in this environment and in this kind of story and existing mostly in mystery as these fringe figures to me is really compelling. So I'm excited to talk about the movie because I know they sort of frame it as Red Scare sort of thing rather than supernatural. And we'll talk a lot about that. But yeah, this was a fun convo. Thanks so much, guys, for being on the episode. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. This was really fun. We'll be back next week talking more Hearts in Atlantis. The last 4 stories, which are Hearts in Atlantis, Blind Willie, Why We're in Vietnam, and Heavenly Shades of Night Are Falling. I think it'll be a fun convo. So let's sign off with a long days and a pleasant night. Bye, everyone.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. We hope you enjoyed this production. If you like our programming, consider searching for other Bloody Disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.